Chapter 249. Why can't you understand? Shen Miao squatted down and looked at Shen Qing, who was in the cell. She was like an adult looking at an ignorant child and gently shook her head. The entire Prince Yu residence was exterminated and only you survived. No matter if it was a conspiracy or not, no matter if you have any relation with the murderer, as long as you are alive, you will become a great sin. What relation can I have with the murderer? Shen Qing retorted, why would I want to exterminate the entire Prince Yu residence? I have no grievances or hatred with him, even if there is, it is you. Her words suddenly stopped halfway as she looked at Shen Miao in disbelief. It was you who did it. Shen Miao's lips slightly curled up. It was you who did it. Shen Qing suddenly grabbed the railing of the iron fence and looked at Shen Miao. It is you. You and Prince Yu of the first rank have a deep enmity, and it was you who let people exterminate his entire family. You deliberately left me alive so that I would be the scapegoat for you. Shen Miao, you have a good scheme. She looked at Shen Miao and her heart was shocked and angry. She was shocked that Shen Miao was so sinister and angry that she had fallen to such a state, and it was all because of Shen Miao. Eldest sister, one must produce evidence for everything. Shen Miao smiled gently, but from your words just now, it seems that you have become smarter after staying in prison for 2 days. Even though she denied Shen Qing's words, but in Shen Qing's eyes, Shen Miao had admitted to the crimes that she committed. Shen Qing was furious. What do you want to do? Shen Miao, you will not succeed. My father and older brother will definitely save me. They will find evidence, and at the end the one sitting in prison will be you and not me. At that time, I will definitely think of ways to hack you into 1,000 pieces. You are still counting on Second Shu and Shen Yuan. Shen Miao ridiculed. Second Shu is now afraid of being implicated and did not even come to see you. As for Shen Yuan, Shen Miao smiled. He could have a good career and a limitless future, but because of you, there are endless troubles. Do you really think that he would want to save you? Shen Qing glared at Shen Miao, but in her heart she knew that what Shen Miao said was not wrong at all. How would she not know what kind of character Shen Gui had? As early as when Shen Gui married her to Prince Yu of the first rank, Shen Qing could see clearly that Shen Gui was the same as old Shen Furen and would only seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. As for her second brother, who had been somewhat unpredictable since young, although he had helped her solve many problems in the past, this time, it affected Shen Yuan's career. Would Shen Yuan really help her? Shen Miao, stop talking nonsense. Despite the uneasiness in her heart, Shen Qing still forced herself to say, my mother won't just stand by and watch. My mother will definitely find a way to save me. As long as my mother appears, with second brother's ability, it won't be difficult to find out the truth. At that time, the unlucky ones will be you. Second aunt. Shen Miao sighed. I know that Second Shen treats you very well and you are Second Shen's eyes. If anything bad happens to you, Second Shen will definitely risk her life to protect you, just like how she treated me in the beginning. Only then did Shen Qing's restless mood ease a little, and she also felt somewhat pleased with herself. Ren Wanyun had always indulged her, and among the 3D daughters in the Shen residence, Chen Roqiu was slightly stricter towards Shen Yu, and Luo Shuayan was rarely together with Shen Miao. Only Ren Wanyun was 100 times more indulgent towards Shen Qing. It was because when Shen Qing was born, Ren Wanyun had a difficult birth and it was not easy for both mother and daughter to be safe, thus Ren Wanyun was very attentive towards this daughter. Even when Shen Qing wanted to fight for Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi, Ren Wanyun did not say anything bad about it. Now even if others were indifferent to her, as long as Ren Wanyun was around, she would definitely not allow her to be wronged. Shen Qing's proud smile had yet to rise when she heard Shen Miao's laughing voice, but eldest sister, make a guess. Between you and seventh younger brother, who is better in Second Shen's heart? Chapter 250. Shen Qing was startled and stared at Shen Miao without speaking. Shen Miao looked at her gently. Everyone in the residence knows how much second Shen dotes on seventh younger brother. If seventh younger brother is to be lost because of you, do you think second Shen would be willing to take this risk? In fact, I am also looking forward to know the answer. One do not know if eldest sister can answer it for me. Shen Qing's body started to tremble violently. She was clearer than anyone else about Shen Yuanbo's position in Ren Wanyun's heart. With Ren Wanyun's current age, Shen Yuanbo was naturally very precious. In addition, even though Shen Yuanbo was mischievous, he was also very likable. The most important thing was that Shen Yuanbo was a son. In this world, it was not easy for females, and in Ren Wanyun's heart, she was always more biased towards her youngest son. If Shen Yuanbo was to be sacrificed for her, Shen Qing was well aware of the answer. She would be the one to be abandoned. But no matter how fearful her heart was, facing Shen Miao, Shen Qing was not willing to show any weakness. She looked at Shen Miao and sneered, "What do you want to say? Could it be that you want to say that no matter what I will die?" Shen Miao, do not forget that I still have the imperial flesh and blood in my stomach. The child in my stomach has the blood of the imperial family. Even if it is for him, I will definitely not make any mistakes. After saying this, Shen Qing stroked her stomach and showed a loving smile. This really made one somewhat stunned. After all, a few days ago, she was still beating her stomach and wished that this illegitimate child was not there. "Eldest sister, do you really think that he is your life-saving talisman?" Shen Miao's fluttering eyes landed on Shen Qing's slightly bulging stomach and lightly said, "If it was in the past, with His Majesty's importance to Prince Yu, naturally one would want to keep this child. But now, one fear that it will become your life-saving talisman." "What do you mean?" Shen Qing did not understand what Shen Miao was saying, but from Shen Miao's determined gaze, there was a sudden fear in her heart. Her intuition told her that Shen Miao was not biased towards her, but why would the child in her stomach become her life-saving talisman? Naturally, Shen Qing did not know that some rumors were circulating in the palace and had reached the emperor's ears, thus some things had quietly changed. If it was in the past, in order to protect Prince Yu's flesh and blood, Emperor Wenhui naturally would not let Shen Qing be buried with him so early. But now, once the seed of doubt arose, the emperor would be cruel and merciless. It was likely that he wished he could cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so that he could send Shen Qing and the vile spawn in her belly to hell as soon as possible. Seeing Shen Miao smiling without saying a word, Shen Qing became even more flustered. She snapped, "Shen Miao, I have no enmity with you. Why are you trying to harm me? No grudges." Shen Miao seemed to have heard a funny joke as she looked at Shen Qing. "When you mother and daughter schemed against me, did you ever think that there was no grievance or hatred? You." Shen Qing was unwilling in her heart. She looked at Shen Miao as if she was looking at a terrifying person. She said, "You have harmed me. You will not have a good death. One day, your first branch will also become stray dogs, trampled by others, and all of you will die a horrible death." At the end, her voice suddenly became sharp, as if she could only use such a method to hide the fear in her heart. But in the midst of her abuse, Shen Miao's expression did not change. She whispered, "The saying one's fortune will change is not false, but to wait for the heavens to change, one fear that it would be too difficult. In this world, the plan lies with the people." Fortunately, everything was not in vain. Shen Qing's so-called horrible death was something that she had already tasted in her previous life. At that time, Luo Shuaiyan had already passed away, Shen Qiu was drowned, and in the first branch of the Shen family, Shen Exayan and all the servants were thrown into prison. Listening to the rumors from the little eunuchs in the cold palace, Shen Exayan was squatting in the most terrifying prison. Iron chains were pierced through his shoulder blades to prevent him from escaping, and his cheeks were branded with the word "prisoner." For a general who was decisive in killing on the battlefield, this was undoubtedly the most unacceptable. If one were to say that the physical torture was still bearable, then the mental humiliation was the most painful part for Shin Axin. And at that time, she was locked in the cold palace and watched as Fu Ming was pushed down from the crown prince position, and Mei Furen was immensely pleased with herself. Chapter 251. Shin Qing was already somewhat confused. She was after all young and had not experienced much, and Ren Wanyun had always pampered her as she grew up. Once something happened, the way to bear it would be very, very low. She screamed, "Shin Miao, you are not a human. You will not die a good death." Shin Miao quietly looked at her. "Shin Qing, how does it feel to see one's hopes being shattered one by one?" Shin Qing stared at Shin Miao with hatred. "When I was at the end of my road, you once sent me off, so this time, I will send you off the last road," she said with a smile, but there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. Her clear-as-water eyes were rippling like black clouds that shrouded the other party. In the previous life, before she died, she saw Shin Qing and Shin Yu standing behind Mei Furen with a charming smile. The second and third households' contributions could not go unnoticed for the first household of the Shin family to end up with a miserable ending. She walked this difficult life again so that she could pull out the fangs of the poisonous snake one by one and then slowly torture them. Shin Qing did not understand her words and only bitterly gritted her teeth. "Shin Miao, you will not die a good death." Shin Miao stood up and looked down at Shin Qing from above. That slightly immature face in the gloomy prison showed a kind of majesty and magnificence that could not be looked at directly. And in that majesty, there was a faint black storm that eventually turned into a sneer on her lips. The purple skirt fluttered in front of the prison and that figure gradually disappeared. The last sentence that Shin Qing heard was, Shin Miao said, "Shin Qing, you are the first." In the eastern courtyard of the Shin residence, there was an unusual silence on this day. Shin Gue stayed in the room with a gloomy expression on his face. Today he heard from the eunuch in the palace that Shin Qing's matter was really not easy to handle. Most likely there was a problem between Emperor Wen Hui and Prince Yu, and this problem was obviously more serious than what the courtiers guessed. At the moment it was a dilemma. If he were to manage Shin Qing's matter, one feared that Emperor Wen Hui would be unhappy, and if he did not care about Shin Qing, the rumors would spread more and more, and when there was trouble, the first person to look for would be him. He was sighing here, and Wan Yinyang walked over to his side and gently massaged his shoulders. Shin Gue was lustful and had many concubines in his residence, but Ren Wanyun was strict, and those concubines were not able to give birth to any sons or daughters for him. Even if they were lucky enough to give birth, they would die very quickly. It was this Wan Yinyang who gave birth to a daughter, Shin Dongling, under Ren Wanyun's eyelids, and even raised her up to this age, which was enough to see her ability. At the beginning the servants in the residence all spread that if Wan Yinyang did not give birth to a daughter but a son, one feared that her status would be able to compete with Ren Wanyun. Wan Yinyang and old Shin Furen were both singers, and Ren Wanyun looked down on her, and old Shin Furen also felt that this identity was somewhat irritating. But Wan Yinyang was indeed a famous actress and was the pillar of the troupe. She was also charming and affectionate, and when she acted as a Hua Dan, there was no need to mention how beautiful she was. Ever since Shin Dongling was born, Wan Yinyang had been staying in her own small courtyard, as if she had disappeared from everyone's eyes. Even that weak and sickly Shin Dongling also did not leave the courtyard all year round and only came out to meet people during the new year and was almost thrown to the back of people's minds. Now that something happened to Shin Qing and old Shin Furen was not happy, Ren Wanyun and Shin Gue would quarrel whenever they meet, and this Wan Yinyang made a comeback. These days, she had served Shin Gue comfortably, and when she looked at Ren Wanyun and her daughter again, there was an unspeakable disgust. Master is still worried about eldest young lady's matter. Wan Yinyang was massaging Shin Gue's shoulders as she persuaded, Master need not be too worried. Since eldest young lady did not do that matter, there will be a day when the truth will come to light. Chapter 252. AI. Shingui sighed, no matter if she does it or not, this matter is not that simple. This time Qing'er will implicate everyone. When Wan Yinyang heard it, she said worriedly, even so, there is always a black and white principle in this world. She said, this concubine and third young lady do not have anything as long as they follow master, life and death do not matter. But second young master's career is good and there is also seventh young master who is still so young. If he is implicated, what can be done? Shingui's expression changed and his heart was somewhat irritated. Even though he was selfish, greedy and lustful in his bones, but towards his two sons, he still had great hopes. One did not know what was going on, but when it came to their generation in the Shin residence, there were not many children. And they had two sons in one household, which was something that made Shingui extremely proud. To a daughter, in Shingui's eyes, it was just an item that could be exchanged for benefits, but to a son, it was a treasure that could carry on the ancestral line. Now because of Shinqing's daughter, he had to compensate his own pair of sons. Shingui felt stuffy when he thought about it. This concubine heard that Furen is currently running around for eldest young lady. It is really pitiful for a parent's heart. If it was not that this concubine is small and weak, one really hope that I can be of some help. Wan Yinyang continued. What help? When Shingui heard Wan Yinyang mention Ren Wan Yun, he felt even more annoyed and said, it is all because of that crazy woman who taught such a shameless good daughter and now even implicate everyone. Don't know what it means. Wan Yinyang seemed to be frightened as she abruptly shrank back and the hand that was pressing on his shoulder also stopped. After pausing for a moment, she then said softly, Master must not blame Furen. Such a big matter had happened and Furen's heart is also not feeling well. If eldest young lady were to think wrongly in prison and do something irrational, how sad would Furen be? Shingui said impatiently, what can she do? His voice suddenly paused and Shingui slowly said, irrational things. Wan Yinyang's eyes flashed but her voice was filled with worry, a young lady who just married over and such a thing happened and was locked up in prison. Eldest young lady has been pampered since young, so it is very possible that she would not be able to think it through. It's better to send someone to persuade him not to do anything stupid. Shingui suddenly stood up and looked outside. The sun was about to set in the west. The sky darkened especially early in winter. He said, I'm going out for a while. It is so late, where is master going? Wan Yinyang asked. I have something to do. You can have dinner by yourself. Shingui strode out. When Shingui's figure could no longer be seen, Wan Yinyang then closed the door and walked to the table to sit down. There was a dazzling array of dishes on the table. When the east courtyard was filled with gloom, her food was exquisite. But who knew that a few years ago when she was eating moldy steamed buns and rotten porridge, she was harmed by Ren Wan Yun to the point that she could not even gather money for Shin Dongling's medical fees. What was she thinking at that time? In the past she was unlucky, but now it was Ren Wan Yun and her daughter's turn to be unlucky. Ren Wan Yun caused her daughter to be so careful even though she was a Shu daughter for so many years and did not even have the chance to leave the courtyard. Now that Shin Qing was in prison, one feared that she would be more miserable than Shin Dongling in the past for the rest of her life. Go and call third young lady over to eat. She instructed the maid by her side and the maid left. Yinyang, will master really take action against eldest young lady? Another maid asked carefully. Of course. Wan Yinyang smiled charmingly, he definitely will. After being husband and wife with Shingui for so many years, she knew better than anyone what Shingui was thinking in his heart. Just now she deliberately reminded him just to remind Shingui of some things. If Rin Wanya knew that her own daughter was finally settled by her own husband, one did not know how carefree it would be. She scooped up a spoonful of soup and slowly tasted it. At the same time, Shen Yuan, who was in Kai Yun Yuan, also put on a cloak, and without greeting anyone, he walked out of the Shen residence's main doors. Chapter 253. The night gradually darkened and the winter nights were always exceptionally cold. If one were to walk outside, the north wind seemed to be able to blow into the seams of one's bones, making one feel pain even if one moved. In the gloomy prison, the wind blew in through the narrow window, making the people in the prison to shrink into a ball. She wrapped the tattered quilt tightly around her body and only her head was exposed. She got up with great effort and tried to close the window that the wind blew in. However, she could not reach it even when she tiptoed. After a moment, she gave up this idea, fearing that if she used too much strength, it would only make herself weaker. When the patrolling jailer saw this scene, he only smiled at this scene and did not step forward to help. After staying in this kind of gloomy place for a long time, one would more or less be somewhat distorted. Most likely it was a kind of pleasure to watch the prisoners suffer, at least for now. Shen Qing glanced at the jailer and quickly lowered her head to hide the trace of hatred in her eyes. After being here for a few days, she had suffered all the hardships that she should have suffered. She did not know if it was because Shen Yuan and Shen Gui did not manage to bribe them, but these jailers did not treat her any different from others and also made fun of her suffering. If there was anything that was deliberately taken care of, it would be that she was not like the other female prisoners who had her innocence destroyed by these jailers. However, perhaps this was not the credit of the Shen family. After all, she was still carrying Prince Yu's flesh and blood in her stomach. No matter if her background was glorious or not, she was after all stained with a little royal blood. Shen Qing carefully touched her lower abdomen. Now this was the only thing that she could rely on. She did not know why, but the words that Shen Miao said to her in the afternoon made her feel an extreme fear. This was something that she had never had before. Even when she was first brought to the prison, she did not have such thoughts because she knew that there would always be someone who would come to save her and her loved ones would not let her suffer in vain. But Shen Miao had analyzed it word by word for her, shattering her hopes one by one, allowing Shen Qing to see clearly how weak she was. It also made Shen Qing doubt if she could escape unscathed this time. The jailer glanced at her and was about to walk out again when Shen Qing suddenly called out, "Big brother." The other party stopped and walked over to her. Probably because he couldn't stand the strange smell on Shen Qing's body, he waved his hand in disgust and asked, "What's the matter? In the past few days, has my family come to see me? Or did you pass a message to me?" She held back her anger. A little jailer actually dared to look at her with such a look of disdain. If it was in the past, she was afraid that he wouldn't even have enough time to curry favor with her. These despicable people who fawn on those in power. The jailer laughed. "What are you thinking, Miss Shin? The case hasn't been solved yet. Who would dare to see you? Besides, apart from that younger sister of yours, no one else in your family has asked about you," the jailer said in a mocking tone. After all, such a thing happened to Shen Qing. Even if she was able to clear her name in the future, she would still have to bear the burden of many gossips. Moreover, the Shen family would also fall into such a predicament and it would be very difficult for them to pass their days. Presumably the Shen family had decided to give up this daughter. Thinking of this, the jailer's attitude towards Shen Qing became even more impolite. Shen Qing's heart did not know if she was disappointed or relaxed. After hesitating for a moment, she then looked at the jailer and said, "Big brother, if my older brother comes to see me, you can say that I have heavy thoughts and do not wish to see others. How about not letting him see me?" As she spoke, she took off a bracelet from her wrist and handed it over through the iron bars. When she was in prison, most of the jewelry on her body had been taken away. This bracelet was worn by Ren Wanyun on the day of her marriage and was also very precious. Shenqing kept a selfish motive and did not take this thing out. Thinking about it, she was forced to give the bracelet out today. Chapter 254. When the jailer saw the bracelet, his eyes lit up and he snatched the bracelet away and looked at it carefully under the light. Seeing that the color was not bad, he then said with a smile, "Since you said so, I will help you. But it is a good thing that your older brother came to see you. Why do you still push him out?" Shenqing forced a smile and said, "Because of me, the residence is in trouble. One really feel apologetic and do not have the face to see them." The jailer nodded his head, but there was some contempt in his eyes. If she was really such a self-respecting female, how would she commit adultery behind her family's back and even get pregnant before marriage? Now saying that she felt apologetic and did not have the face to see others was really putting on an act. But the jailer did not have any reason to refuse and left after accepting the matter. After the jailer walked far away, Shenqing then squatted down and helplessly hugged her shoulders and buried her head in her knees. Now she often did this action because she did not know if what she was doing was right or wrong and did not know where the road ahead was. She could only not look or think, as if when she opened her eyes again, she would be able to return to the time when she was the eldest young lady of the Shen family. She did not know how long she slept in a daze until she heard someone knocking on the iron bars. She then raised her head in a daze. In the flickering light, a familiar face was reflected. If it was in the past, she would have been overjoyed to see this face, but after Shen Miao's words, Shenqing was so scared that she fell to the ground and looked at the person in front of her in a panic. Shen Yuan said, "Is younger sister doing well? Second older brother, why are you here?" Shenqing asked as she quietly took a step back. Shen Yuan saw her action and frowned slightly but did not say anything. He took out a key from his sleeves and opened the cell door. Shenqing was surprised for a moment when she saw it and immediately stood up with joy. "Second older brother, are you here to save me out?" Shen Yuan shook his head, temporarily unable to save you. He took out a bag of snacks and handed it to Shenqing. "Come over to see you and get you something to eat." Shenqing was somewhat disappointed. Shen Yuan had already walked in and seemed to feel that the prison was somewhat dirty. He had a somewhat disgusted look on his face. When Shenqing saw this, she felt somewhat sad in her heart. She subconsciously took the oiled paper bag from Shen Yuan's hands and opened it. In the oiled paper bag, there was a fragrant pastry that was still steaming. It was her favorite chestnut cake in the past. "You have suffered these days," Shen Yuan said with a rare gentleness. "I know you love to eat this, so I brought it to you to satisfy your craving." Shenqing's nose turned sour and she almost shed tears. These days, she had been eating spoiled food in the prison and was still not full. Every day, she lived in fear and anxiety. Now that she saw her old love and Shen Yuan was coincidentally by her side, all the grievances in her heart gushed out. "Don't cry. After you finish eating, wait a few days and I'll save you," Shen Yuan said gently. Shenqing somewhat awkwardly took out a piece of pastry and was about to send it to her mouth when she saw Shen Yuan's gentle smile. Her hands suddenly trembled, as if a basin of cold water was poured over her head. Inexplicably, Shen Miao's words from the afternoon reverberated in her ears. "He could have a good career and a limitless future, but because of you, there were endless troubles. Do you really think that he would want to come and save you?" The pastry was close to her mouth but Shenqing could not bite it no matter what. The most important thing in the relationship between people was trust. If it was in the past, Shenqing would definitely choose to trust Shen Yuan without hesitation. But ever since the matter of Prince Yu, Shenqing had personally witnessed the coldness of the Shen family. Was this second older brother really willing to give up his good career and take such a big risk to save her? If it was Shenqing herself, she would also be somewhat hesitant. Qing suddenly remembered the jade bracelet that she used to beat the jailer. At that time, she said that if Xin Yuan came over to see her, she must stop him. But what was the matter with Xin Yuan appearing now? Was it that jailer who took her things but did not do anything, or Xin Yuan simply used other ways to come in? Chapter 255. At this time, Qing suddenly discovered that none of the prison guards who were patrolling in the prison had appeared. And there were no other prisoners in the cell that she was locked up in. That was to say, there was only her and Xin Yuan here at the moment. They were originally the most intimate siblings, but it made her feel a chill down her spine. "Why are you not eating?" Xin Yuan asked her. Qing forced a smile and was quick-witted. I cannot bear to. Leave it for later. It will not taste good when it is cold. Xin Yuan smiled. I will send it to you again in a few days. No. Qing declined. I do not want to eat now. Were you not very hungry just now? Xin Yuan looked at her. Why do you suddenly not want to eat? Qing waved her hands in panic. I just do not want to eat. Suddenly I feel somewhat uncomfortable. Most likely it is because of my body that the things I eat are occasionally strange. She wrapped the pastry in a paper bag and placed it at the side. Wait till I feel comfortable and will definitely eat it. Xin Yuan silently looked at her actions and his eyes were dark, but he finally sneered. Younger sister seemed to have become smarter after staying in prison for a few days. His voice no longer had the gentleness from before, but instead there was an inexplicable cruelty. Xin Yuan said, it seems that you already know. It is a pity, as one originally wanted to let younger sister go more easily. Qing's body suddenly started to tremble as she looked at Xin Yuan. Second older brother, what do you mean by this? Younger sister is so guarded against me, and I thought that you already understood my meaning. Even if you are not willing to eat the pastry, then forget it. Even though you have let down older brother's painstaking efforts, but seeing that you are pregnant now, second older brother will not haggle with you. Xin Yuan's words were very calm and matched with his slightly refined face. There was a kind of power that made one fearful. Qing seemed to be aware of something and suddenly shook her head frantically and wanted to shout, but before she could make a sound, her throat was grabbed by someone. How could a person who usually looked so refined have such great strength? What was even more frightening was that his subordinate was his own twin sister, yet he did not hesitate or pity her at all. It was as if he was looking at a passerby. Qing's eyes widened from being strangled as she stared fixedly at the person in front of her. Xin Yuan chuckled softly and said, younger sister must not blame second older brother for being ruthless. Now that you have caused such a big disaster, you will implicate the entire Shen family if you are not careful. Could it be that for the sake of his younger sister, his parents, and even Yuan Bo would have to pay with their lives? Sister, you can't be too selfish. Qing struggled with all her might. However, she was a woman, and a pregnant woman at that. Moreover, she had been tortured to the point of being on the verge of death. How could her strength surpass that of a man of his age? She could only kick her legs in vain, and even the straw on the ground was kicked everywhere. I know you're not satisfied. Xin Yuan said softly, younger sister originally had nothing to do with this matter, but now she has to pay with her life because of this. I am your second brother. I will definitely avenge you. Second older brother will guarantee you that the first household of the Shen family and Shen Miao's ending will be thousands of times more miserable than yours. So younger sister must not hate second older brother. Only when you die, the second household will not be implicated and second older brother's career will be proud. Only then can I help you take revenge. Do you understand? Qing's body gradually went limp and her eyes started to lose their spirit. It was as if she was a dying fish that was gradually drying up on the dry shore. Xin Yuan released his hand and the body under his hand fell to the ground with a plopped sound. In just a short period of time, he had turned from a lively dragon and a lively tiger to a completely silent one. Shenqing's life was now in prison. Chapter 256. Shen Yuan said faintly as he looked at Shenqing's body. After a moment, he used a needle to prick Shenqing's fingertip and grabbed Shenqing's hand to write a line of blood words on the stone wall of the prison cell. Following that, he pulled out Shenqing's belt and tied a knot on the bars before putting it on Shenqing's head. After everything was done, he then stood up and picked up the oiled paper bag that Shenqing placed on the ground before taking one last look at the slightly swaying figure on the iron bars. Younger sister, you will not die in vain. Second older brother will definitely take revenge for you, he said softly. This winter in the Ding capital seemed to be a really eventful period as storms came one after another. The massacre of Prince Yu's entire household was known by everyone, and even though the commoners were secretly clapping their hands in joy, they also knew of the dangers involved. And the only surviving new bride, the eldest young lady of the Shen family, was sent to prison. Because she was inextricably linked to this case, everyone stuck their heads out to inquire about the results. In the end, on this day, there was suddenly news that the eldest young lady of the Shen family had hanged herself in prison using her belt. Before she died, she left a blood letter saying that she had nothing to do with this matter, and with her husband's family dead, she was unwilling to live in this world and could only die to show her will. People were very strange as they were much more tolerant towards the dead. If it was previously because Shenqing got pregnant out of wedlock and married to Prince Yu, she would be called a loose woman who did not abide by the ways of a woman, but now that she died, it attracted a lot of sighs. Everyone praised her for having integrity and strength of character, but she was harmed by Prince Yu for a lifetime. The previous rumors seemed to have collapsed overnight. Thinking about it, to be able to make a pregnant female die to show her will, one would think that there must be a huge grievance. Moreover, those rumors were without any basis. Shenqing and Prince Yu had no grievances, and with Prince Yu's death, she still had to be a widow, so it was not worthwhile. Thus it seemed that with Shenqing's death, Shen residents and Shenqing's suspicions were washed clean. Even Emperor Wenhui in the palace did not say anything, but they were still unable to find out who the murderer was, and the case would most likely become an unsolved case. In the Shen residence, everything seemed to be no different from the past. Shenqing had already married into Prince Yu's residence, and her corpse would be buried together with Prince Yu in the name of Prince Yu's consort. Old Shen Furen felt slightly comforted because of this. No matter if it was dead or alive, the Shen family finally had a Wangfei, and at least the reputation was not bad. Shen Wan and Chen Roqiu appeared to be very sad, and Shen Yu was crying uncontrollably, but even though they were so sad, they did not even go to the prison to visit Shenqing, thus no one knew if they were acting or sincere. In comparison, Shen Gue, as a father, was much colder. He did his work as usual, and there was no sign of sorrow on his face. Occasionally, when one looked at him, one could even see a flash of joy in his eyes. Perhaps to Shen Gue, Shenqing's suicide had saved him a lot of trouble. Naturally, he was happy in his heart. As for Shen Yuan, the entire burden of the second household of the Shen family had fallen onto his shoulders. Every day he would be running around outside, and there was almost no one in the residence, so one did not know what the situation was. If one were to talk about the person that made people sigh the most, it would be Ren Wanyun. After Ren Wanyun got to know the news of Shenqing committing suicide in the prison, she fainted on the spot. After she woke up, she was somewhat delirious and pulled Xiang Lan's hand, saying that she wanted to see Shenqing return to her home. It was obvious that this matter was a huge blow to Ren Wanyun, and in such a delirious situation, naturally she was unable to be the master of the second household. Shen Gue let Wan Yinyang temporarily take charge of the second household's matters, and everyone in Kaiyun Yuan were secretly whispering that at the end of the Shen family's second household, Wan Yinyang would most likely be able to make a comeback, and even that sick and weak Shin Dongling would most likely be able to make a comeback in one fell swoop. Fortunately, old Shin Furen's heart ached for Shin Yuanbo and in the end did not let Wan Yinyang take care of her grandson, but brought Shin Yuanbo to Rong Jing Tang and personally raised him. Chapter 257. The second and third household of the Shin family were in a mess, but it had nothing to do with the first household at all. When Shin Xan and Luo Shuiyan came back this time, they already had some complaints about the other two households, so naturally they would not rush to help. Every day they would practice swordplay in the residence or go out to visit old friends, and it was considered to be a comfortable life. Shin Qiu was also brought along by Shin Xan to gradually come into contact with the officials. As Shin Qiu's military merits became more and more abundant, there would be a day when Shin Xan's position would be Shin Qiu's turn to sit. As for Shin Miao, after resting for a while, she once again went to Guangwen Tang. As it was nearing the end of the year, the teachers in Guangwen Tang had slacked off a lot in their lessons. The teachers also knew that at this time, the students were not in the mood to study, so they conveniently gave a good impression. Shin Miao did not go for many days but did not fall behind in her homework. On the contrary, when those students saw her, they started to discuss spiritedly. Shin Qing's matter was in an uproar, but no one in the Shin family had any opinion on it. Early on after the incident in Prince Yu residence, Shin Yu was ordered by Chen Roqiu to stay in the residence and not go to the academy, so as to avoid any mistakes. Thus when Shin Miao came, everyone had the interest to inquire. Yi Peilan said, "Oh, Shin Miao. You actually came. Why are you not wearing plain clothes?" She deliberately raised her voice. "Ai, it is no wonder. At the beginning Shin Qing and you two sisters also had many frictions, but one fear that you were not that upset." Yi Peilan and Shin Qing were good friends and wanted to help Shin Qing vent her anger, thus the words that she said were naturally filled with 120% malicious intent. Everyone looked towards the door and saw Shin Miao wearing a dark black long dress with a simple jade bracelet as her jewelry, making her look somewhat cold. In fact, it was not too much to dress up like this, but compared to Shin Yu's plain white long dress with a small white flower on her head, it was slightly inferior. Ming Qi's law states that when there is a funeral in the family, one must wear white clothes when the elder has passed away. Could it be that young Lady Yi does not know how to calculate seniority? Eldest sister is my sister but not my elder. Shin Miao answered without even turning her head and walked to her own seat to sit down. When Feng and Ning saw her, she seemed to be very excited, as if she had a stomach full of questions to ask her. When Yi Peilan was stabbed by Shin Miao, she was unable to restrain her anger and said without thinking, "Shin Miao, do not try to be a good person. Initially it was you and Shin Qing who did not get along, and when Shin Qing was in trouble, you were secretly happy in your heart. Otherwise why would your father and mother, who are Shin Qing's uncle and auntie, not lend a helping hand when Shin Qing was imprisoned?" When the words were spoken, everyone's eyes immediately looked towards Shin Miao, as if waiting for her to answer this thorny question. That's right, when Shin Qing was imprisoned, Shin Xan indeed did not lend a helping hand. Otherwise, with Shin Xan's meritorious service, he would still be able to speak in front of the emperor. At the very least, he would be able to help Shin Qing fight for some time. At the very least, Shin Qing would not have felt so hopeless and helpless in prison that she hung herself. Shin Miao's eyes turned cold and suddenly turned to stare at Yi Peilan. When Yi Peilan was stared at by her, she unconsciously felt a chill. Before she could speak again, she heard Shin Miao's mocking voice ringing, "Young Lady Yi and my eldest sister have always had a deep sisterly relationship, and one think that young Lady Yi would be very upset for eldest sister. But at the beginning my second Shin hoped to rescue eldest sister and came to the Yi residence to invite Yi Furen for a chat, hoping that Yi Furen would be able to persuade Yi Darren to help, but I remember that at that time Yi Furen claimed to be sick and refused to meet. Yi Pei-lan was surprised for a moment before her face flushed red. The surrounding students looked at her with deep meaning in their eyes. She stuttered, that is because my mother is indeed sick. Since Yi Furen could claim to be sick at this juncture, why can't my father and mother claim to be sick at this juncture? Shen Miao did not care. Her words did not contain a single dirty word, but she ruthlessly humiliated Yi Pei-lan. Shen Miao continued speaking, since it is something that Yi Furen is unable to do, why would young lady Yi force others to do it? My eldest sister is in prison and even her closest relatives, second Shu and second older brother, are unable to do anything. You think that it is easy to rescue her? Young lady Yi, one's mouth only has two pieces and it is easier said than done. Do not do to others what you do not want others to do to you. If next time you want to teach others a lesson, please do it yourself first before saying anything. Chapter 258. Pei Lang just entered the hall and heard Shen Miao's words. He looked towards the middle of the hall and saw Shen Miao standing ramrod straight. Her clear and light words had completely humiliated Yi Pei-lan and the entire Yi residence. Yi Pei-lan was speechless and could only bite her lower lips as she stared at Shen Miao. That's right. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. The Yi residence was a master that changed the direction of the wind and still stood on the moral high ground to criticize others. It was really laughable. Shen Miao. Feeling more and more annoyed, Yi Pei-lan was about to rush up and fight with Shen Miao when she heard a light cough and Pei Lang walked in from outside. Seeing teacher, everyone immediately kept quiet. Yi Pei-lan's anger had not dissipated when she heard Pei Lang lightly saying, "One cannot quarrel in the academy." Finishing, he gave Yi Pei-lan a warning look. Everyone knew that in Guangwen-tang, even though Pei Lang was a scholar and had a gentle temperament, he was respected by others. Even with Yi Pei-lan's arrogant and willful character, she did not dare to argue with him. Shen Miao sat down on her seat and Feng and Ning nudged her arm and whispered, "Teacher Pei is helping you out." Yi Pei-lan is too much that even Teacher Pei could not stand it. Shen Miao looked up and met Pei Lang's gaze. In that gentle expression, there was a little more probing, as if he wanted to see what exactly she was thinking. She met Pei Lang's gaze and her lips hooked up imperceptibly as she slowly smiled. Pei Lang was slightly startled. The young female had a delicate and pretty appearance and was cold and dignified, but that smile just now seemed to have some charm that only an adult female would have. There was a trace of faintly discernible seduction that made one could not help but want to explore the secrets within. However, at that moment, Shen Miao lowered her head and that short-lived smile seemed to be an illusion. Feng Xian Pawnshop naturally knew all the rumors in the Ding capital, be it big or small matters. Ji Yushu buried his head in his abacus and said to the two people opposite him, "The Jiang Nanchen family's transaction is really worth it. With such a large sum of money, this pawn shop would not need to open for 3 years. You just eat up so much money and not leave any for fifth Shin young lady." Gao Yang jokingly said, "In any case, others are the ones who sell information." Ji Yushu's lips twitched. She herself said that the money will belong to me and I took such a big risk to create news for her. Otherwise, how can the matter of Prince Yu residence be handled so cleanly without any future troubles? He said, "What's more, if he didn't tell Qin Yushan that he didn't want money, I wouldn't be able to do business for 30 years after this transaction. Thanks to her, I didn't earn so much. If she wasn't a woman, I would definitely teach her a lesson. If you really teach her a lesson, I will definitely send you a coffin." Gao Yang gently fanned himself with a gentle smile, but the words that he said made one's teeth itch. Prince Yu of the first rank wanted to harm her and was exterminated by her entire family. Her own sisters schemed against her and she took their lives. Such a vicious and merciless girl, I bet you would die in less than 3 moves. Less of that. Ji Yushu was dissatisfied, this lord that weak. Moreover, no matter how powerful she is still a female and females have weaknesses. Ji Yushu looked at Xie Jingxing who was indifferently drinking tea at the side and said, put it this way, if there is a day when 5th Shen young lady falls in love with our 3rd Xie older brother, she would definitely be pestering and coquettish. No matter how tempered she is, she would not be able to match our 3rd older brother's tenderness. At that time, even if 3rd Xie older brother points a sword at her, she would not even frown. Ha! Gao Yang looked at him coldly. At that time, she would first cut 3rd Xie into 8 pieces and then mince him to feed the dogs. 3rd Xie older brother, Gao Yang scolded you as a dog. Ji Yushu immediately complained. Xie Jingxing played with the hairpin in his hands and rolled his eyes at both of them. There was a rare trace of awe on his face. They are here. Chapter 259. They are here. Following Xie Jingxing's words, Gao Yang's teasing expression was immediately kept away and he looked at him. You said that they are here in the Ding capital. You all pay more attention these few days. Xie Jingxing frowned. The things in Prince Yu residence might have been spread out. To avoid exposing your identity, all of you should not go out these days. But how can you do it alone? Not waiting for Gao Yang to speak, Ji Yushu anxiously said, you had already attracted their attention and now that they have entered the Ding capital, they will definitely look for you first. You cannot alarm the other people in the capital. No need to worry. Xie Jingxing stretched his waist and a trace of ruthlessness bloomed in his smile. I have waited for them to come for a long time. 3rd older brother Xie, you are going to teach people a lesson again. Ji Yushu's eyes were sparkling as he looked at him. Can you bring me along this time? All right. Xie Jingxing casually said, you can be a target. Gao Yang, the matter regarding Prince Yu and the Shen family in the Ding capital was quickly drowned in the joy of the approaching new year. Since it was the new year, there was a lively atmosphere everywhere. The tragic massacre on that snowy night and the desperate suicide in the gloomy prison seemed to have been thrown to the back of people's minds. Nothing was more important than welcoming the new year. Time would not stop, new snow would cover the old snow, new topics would cover the old discussions and new hope would always be more joyous than the past. The emperor in the palace did not show any gloomy expression because of the matter and even spent a lot of money to set up a palace banquet in the palace and invited all the concubines to celebrate the new year. Obviously the death of his younger brother did not make Emperor Wenhui feel sad and this made the commoners feel that the heartless rumors of the imperial family was true. But only the really smart people knew that Emperor Wenhui had gotten rid of a future trouble and was able to handle it so cleanly that he was naturally happy. Thus even when the Yamen was unable to find the murderer and the entire case became an unsolved case, Emperor Wenhui did not pursue it too much. Shen Qing and Prince Yu were buried together in the imperial family tomb. But because Shen Qing committed suicide and her identity was too awkward at that time, the imperial family did not give any compensation. This made old Shen Furen very indignant for a while. In the western courtyard of the Shen residence, Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang were taking Shen Miao's books out to bask in the sun. Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan went to the drill grounds early in the morning to train the new soldiers. There were new soldiers to be recruited at the end of the year and they had to be trained. Shen Qiu also went to join in the fun and only Shen Miao was left in the western courtyard. A few days ago eldest young master sent a number of books over, why not bring them out to dry? Guyu asked Shen Miao. I still have use for those books so there is no need to dry them. Shen Miao answered. Ever since Shen Qiu saw so many military books in Shen Miao's room, he immediately told the matter to Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan in high spirits. But Shen Miao had never shown that she liked the art of war, thus Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan thought that it was just a spur-of-the-moment interest. Nevertheless, they still ordered people to search for many military books. If one did not know, the Tian Tian Xin Xin Yang would Xin Ming be the Xin. Naturally, Xin Miao did not have any plans to be a female general, but the Xin family army would have to face a lot of dangers in the future, and she could only rely on the understanding of the past lifetime to help the Xin family army through these possible difficulties. There was no harm in reading more. Bai Lu was flipping the pages as she spoke. Tomorrow is the Jade Rabbit Festival. Heard that this year there will be tens of thousands of lanterns by the Wanli Lake. Will young lady go tomorrow? The Jade Rabbit Festival was a festival in Mingqi. On the night before the New Year, people would walk out of their houses and go to the streets to look at the lanterns and guess riddles, making it very lively. In the lanterns, there would be an especially big jade rabbit that would bless the entire Mingqi with good weather in the coming year, and the commoners would have a good harvest. The difference between this year's Jade Rabbit Festival and the previous years was that this year's Jade Rabbit would be on the water. At that time, the commoners would be able to place their own lanterns on the water to pray for their inner wishes. Lanterns on the water, the picture would definitely be very lively. Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang were both females in their prime, and it was normal for them to be playful and love new things. Chapter 260. What nonsense are you talking about? Guyu said in annoyance. At that time the streets will definitely be very crowded. What if something happens to young lady? But didn't we all go in the past? Bai Lu was unconvinced. Previous years are previous years, this year is this year. Guyu said fiercely. What Bai Lu said was not wrong. In previous years at this time, Shen Xian and wife would have already returned to the Ding capital, and the entire Shen residents would go out to watch the bustle during the Jade Rabbit Festival, but this year the Shen residents and Prince Yu residents had such a big matter, and the murderer behind it had not been found. If there was someone waiting for an opportunity to retaliate, Shen Miao's situation would indeed be much more dangerous. No matter how big the liveliness, it was not as important as Shen Miao's safety. It's fine. Shen Miao smiled gently. I also wanted to go and take a look at the bustle. With father, mother and eldest brother around, there would not be any danger. But Guyu still wanted to persuade. That's all. Shen Miao interrupted her words and walked back into the room. Guyu could only suppress the worry in her heart. One did not know from when Shen Miao had developed a character of one's own words, and there was no longer the appearance of her seeking help from those two from the second and third household. It was indeed good to have one's own thoughts, but when she was stubborn, it made one feel helpless. Shen Miao returned to the room and walked to her table to sit down. Her gaze fell on the plum tree branches outside. The branches were dotted with red, but it reminded her of the letter that she had received previously. The Qin brothers had already returned to Jiangnan, and after Prince Yu residence was exterminated, they no longer had any contact. Shen Miao was extremely cautious, and all the communication with the Qin family was done through Mo Qing's letter to the Feng Xian pawn shop. Now that Mo Qing's life contract was no longer with the Shen family, others would not suspect her. This time, Mo Qing brought back another piece of news. That young lady Luing that Ji Yushu had previously inquired about finally had her whereabouts. She was in the biggest money-squandering establishment in the Ding capital, Baoxiang Lu. Young lady Luing was one of the top beauties in Baoxiang Lu, and one heard that on the day of the Jade Rabbit Festival, she would also act as the Jade Rabbit Fairy and dance by the Wanli Lake. She really wanted to take a look, so she could take advantage of this opportunity. As for the matter of revenge that Guyu was worried about, it was not even worth mentioning to Shen Miao. The Qin brothers were cooperating with her in the first place, so there was no need to talk about revenge. As for the Shen residents, old Shen Furen was so angry that other than her two sons and the second household's grandson, she did not see anyone else. The second household of the Shen family was considered to have collapsed, and Shen Yuan was busy fawning on the officials and would not make a move on her in the near future. The third branch had always concealed their strength and bided their time. At this critical juncture, they would not cause any trouble. Now that he thought about it, there wasn't a year that was more comfortable than this year. Thinking like this, Shen Miao's lips slightly curled up and Gu Yu, who was looking at her from outside, could not help but be startled. Before she could recover to her senses, she heard Jingzhe's voice. Jingzhe walked in from outside and said, "Young lady, Wan Yinyang of the Eastern Courtyard wants to see you." Wan clan. Gu Yu frowned and whispered, "Why is it her again? Why does this Wan Yinyang keep running over to our courtyard?" Shuangjiang and Bailu also whispered, "This is too eager to curry favor." The few maids were not very welcoming towards Madame Wan. In fact, ever since the matter with Ren Wanyun and Shen Qing, they hated the people of the second household. No matter what Wan Yinyang's motive was, she was after all a person of the second household, and it made one very uncomfortable to run over here all day. A few days ago, when Wan Yinyang wanted to see Shen Miao used all kinds of means to push her away. But today she said, "Let her in." Jingzhe was surprised for a moment before replying and went out. It was Gu Yu and the rest who had a worried look on their faces, fearing that Wan Yinyang had some bad ideas. Chapter 261. After a moment, Wan Yinyang walked in with Jingzhe, and Shen Miao raised her head to look at her. Wan Yinyang was wearing a dark blue-lined jacket and a green horse skirt with a plain silver bracelet on her wrist, looking like an extremely simple person. However, looking at it carefully, the lined jacket was embroidered with little white flowers and the hem of the skirt was changed to a wavy shape. That pair of fair hands were painted with bright nail polish that was dazzling to one's eyes. As for the waistline of the jacket, it made her already slim and graceful figure even more so, causing one's imagination to roam. Looking up, an oval face, big eyes, white skin, red lips, and when she smiled over, even though she tried to restrain it, the coquettish charm in her bones was still revealed. This was a female that knew how to hide. It could be seen from the fact that she did not show her face for so many years because of Shen Dongling, but she was a female that could not keep her cool. Once Shen Qing died and Ren Wanyun went crazy, she could not wait to come out and strut around. Shen Miao had seen a lot of this kind of people in the inner palace in her previous life. Some of them were clever and some of them had good looks. They thought that as long as they were willing, they would be able to firmly control a male's heart. But they did not know that there were countless fresh and tender females in the world, and a male's heart was the most unpredictable. If one was able to keep their cool, perhaps one could have a special position in a male's heart, but once one could not keep their cool, those little cleverness would become a joke of one thinking oneself clever. Wan Yinyang was obviously the kind of person who thought herself clever. Wan Yinyang bowed towards Shen Miao and sat down on the small table opposite Shen Miao. She was sitting sideways and her legs were slightly slanted, making her body very smooth and soft. She was indeed worthy of being a leading role in the Huadan. Shen Miao looked at her calmly and did not say any nonsense and went straight to the point. "Why did Wan Yinyang come to look for me?" Wan Yinyang did not expect that Shen Miao would open her mouth so directly that it made her choke. She heard that Shen Axian and wife had the greatest power in the Shen residence and that the most idiotic fifth young lady was now a powerful one. Thinking that she came over to worm her way in, she did not think that Shen Miao would not even entertain her. This made Wan Yinyang somewhat uncertain whether Shen Miao did not understand the ways of the world or was deliberately mystifying. In fact, Wan Yinyang was thinking too much. Shen Miao did not bother with her because a Yinyang was not worth her attention. Wan Yinyang smiled apologetically. "It is nearing the end of the year, so this concubine came over to see fifth young lady and wish fifth young lady a happy new year." She said, "It seems that because of eldest young lady's matter, I had a disagreement with fifth young lady. I apologize to fifth young lady on behalf of master and Furen." Shen Miao looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. Wan Yinyang, do not know if second Shu and second Shen know of your apologizing on behalf of others. Wan Yinyang was slightly stumped but continued to smile. This concubine's words naturally carry little weight and had heard master mention to this concubine that it was somewhat impulsive that day, thus this concubine acted on her own initiative and came to seek fifth young lady's punishment. Shen Miao looked at her without blinking her eyes. Being stared at by Shen Miao like that, Wan Yinyang's face showed some restlessness, but she immediately suppressed it and smiled. Actually, third young lady also wanted to come and see fifth young lady since they are all sisters, but third young lady recently felt cold and was afraid of the limelight. She only said that she would come and talk to fifth young lady when her body is better. Shen Dongling. Shen Miao raised her eyebrows. Other than the 3D daughters in the Shen residence, there was actually another Shu daughter, Shen Dongling of the second household, who was born to Wan Yinyang. In the Shen residence, the third household, Shen Wan and Chen Roqiu, only had Shen Yu as a daughter. Shen Xian and wife only had Shen Miao and Shen Qiu, but this second household, Shen Gui, had taken in a room full of concubines and also gave birth to Shu daughters, but they died not long after. This was also the reason why the ranking of the D daughters in the Shen family was somewhat strange. Chapter 262. Shen Dongling was ranked third, so she was called third. Mississippi Ren Wan Yun's character was the most jealous, and after Wan Yinyang gave birth to Shen Dongling, she stayed in the courtyard all day and did not come out. That Shen Dongling was also a weak and sickly person. Thus in Ren Wan Yun's past and present lifetime, she did not have any impression of Shen Dongling at all. She was practically a transparent person. Even if she was a concubine's daughter that was no longer favored by any noble family, perhaps she would be bullied and humiliated, or even scolded, but she would not be like this. She was practically forgotten by everyone. Such a person, if he wasn't so weak that he could be ignored, then he was so strong that he could endure what normal people couldn't. In the previous lifetime, Shen Dongling was given to someone else by Ren Wan Yun as a bargaining chip for Shen Gui's career. In this lifetime, Ren Wan Yun had lost her power and Wan Yinyang once again flew to a high branch. It was unknown if Shen Dongling's fate would change because of this. Third older sister's health is not good, so it is better not to come out. Shen Miao said in an indifferent manner, if one were to catch a cold because of this, I would not be able to afford it. Wan Yinyang was somewhat displeased when she heard it, but there was still a smile on her face as she said, this is third young lady's closeness to fifth young lady. It is all this concubine's fault that third young lady was born with an illness and could only watch other children play in the courtyard for so many years. Finishing, she turned her head and used the handkerchief in her hand to cover her mouth, looking extremely sad. Shen Miao somewhat could not stand Wan Yinyang's pretentious attitude and said lightly, no one can decide their own body. Moreover, it is not necessarily bad for third older sister to stay in the courtyard. Eldest older sister was able to enjoy to the fullest, but who knew that a beauty has an unlucky life? Her lips slightly hooked up. One's fortune is not something that can be seen on the surface. When the words were said, Wan Yinyang looked at Shen Miao with some bewilderment, and after a moment she forced a smile. Fifth young lady is right. She suddenly stood up again and looked at Shen Miao. Fifth young lady, this concubine suddenly remembered that there are still some matters and will leave first. If there is a day when fifth young lady is free, one think that third young lady will come and talk to fifth young lady. Her health is not good, so one hope that fifth young lady will be more tolerant. Finishing, she bowed towards Shen Miao and left. However, compared to the figure that had just arrived, he seemed to be in a much more hurried and panicked state. Jingzhe had been serving tea by the side and looking at the back view of Wan Yinyang leaving in a hurry, she said in puzzlement, what is the meaning of this Wan Yinyang? Was he here to express goodwill? And third young lady hasn't left the courtyard for so many years and has only seen young lady a few times. Why do you speak as if you have some feelings for her? You're right. Guyu was cleaning up the table of Wan Yinyang's remaining teacups as she spoke. Now thinking about it, this servant also cannot remember how third young lady looks like. In any case, she is a young lady of the residence and was hidden for so many years. Most likely it was to hide from second Furen. It is really pitiful. What's there to pity? Shen Miao picked up the tea on the table and took a sip, one fear that in her eyes, you all are very pitiful. She. Jingzhe was puzzled. Young lady is talking about third young lady. Shen Miao smiled. It is I who have misjudged. In our residence, there is still a smart person. The purpose of Wan Yinyang's visit today was obviously to probe. However, with Wan Yinyang's intelligence, to be able to think of such a method to probe, on the surface it seemed that she could not wait to announce that she had regained Chen Gui's favor, but upon careful thought, it was not exactly so. The dragon's head and not the tail, that Shen Dongling who had not shown her face was much smarter than Shen Qing. But no matter which side she was on, Shen Miao would not treat her as a friend, not to mention a sister. All be on guard. She put down the teacup in her hands and reminded the maids beside her. Chapter 263. But at the other end, Wan Yinyang hurriedly returned to her own courtyard and closed the door before taking 3 steps forward and said to the figure sitting behind the screen, "Linger." The figure behind the screen paused for a moment and looked towards Wan Yinyang. Wan Yinyang heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the wooden chair before repeating everything that she had said to Shen Miao today from beginning to end. She was originally a Huadan actor and her memory was very good, thus she recited the conversation between the two of them as if it happened right in front of her. After finishing, Wan Yinyang then said, "Linger, what exactly does fifth young lady's words mean? My heart felt somewhat cold when I heard it. Do you think that eldest young lady's matter is related to fifth young lady?" Yinyang must speak cautiously. The person behind the screen said, "Eldest sister's matter is already in the past and what is said outside is what is said. One must never mention this matter again, otherwise one would only harm oneself. I just feel that my heart is somewhat uneasy." Wan Yinyang said. A slight sigh came from behind the screen. The person who was sitting put down the embroidery in her hands and stood up before walking to Wan Yinyang's side. That was also a delicate and beautiful young female. Compared to Shen Qing's generosity, Shen Yu's elegance and Shen Miao's dignity, this young female appeared soft and weak. Her facial features were somewhat like Wan Yinyang's and she had an oval face and big eyes. If her eyes were more quick-witted, most likely she would be scolded as a little vixen. But her expression was pale and even her lips were bloodless. As such, that little bit of seductiveness was reduced and she looked somewhat harmless. She was wearing an old washed goose yellow-colored dress which could possibly belong to Wan Yinyang. This young female's body was not as developed as Wan Yinyang's and when she wore it, it was somewhat big and empty, thus her beauty was reduced and she looked somewhat ordinary. That young female was the Shu daughter of the Shen family's second household, Shen Dongling. Now everything is much better than before. Shen Dongling comforted, "At least Yinyang and I can openly go out and no longer need to be threatened by Furen. This Shen residence is not easy to get by." Wan Yinyang looked at her daughter and her heart turned sour. "In the beginning I was greedy for riches and thought that after entering the Shen residence, one would be able to sleep easy for the rest of one's life. Who knew that being in a noble family is also so tough? For so many years, in order to survive under Madame's eyes, you have no choice but to live like this. The people in this manor are also very powerful. Even the originally quiet fifth young miss looks really scary now." Yinyang, Shen Dongling shook her head. "Regardless of whether eldest sister's matter is related to fifth younger sister, the person behind the scenes has helped us. It will be very difficult for Furen to make a comeback now." Even if second brother is powerful and Furen has the reputation, she has no hope of the past and will not be able to compete with us. That is also true. Wan Yinyang looked at Shen Dongling with a gratified expression. Finally it is over. But Ling, today you asked me to test Fifth Miss, but Fifth Miss is quite cold to me. I'm afraid she doesn't want to accept our goodwill. What should we do now? Do not accept, then do not accept. Shen Dongling smiled. Fifth younger sister seems to be an intelligent person. Since that is the case, it is better not to provoke her in the future. If it is possible, it is also good to let her deal with second older brother. Second young master. Wan Yinyang was surprised for a moment. Second young master has already entered officialdom and fifth young lady is only a young lady. How can she deal with second young master? Yinyang can rest assured. Shen Dongling said, fifth younger sister is not a simple character. She is the sharpest knife in the Shen residence. The small actions of the eastern and western courtyard of the Shen residence were most likely not known by the outside. Other than the people in the residence, most likely in the eyes of the other people in the Ding capital, the general residence was a happy and harmonious scene with benevolent and filial piety. This had always been the case before this year, but unfortunately the things in the world were always changing. Sometimes when the seeds were buried too deep, it would germinate and grow at an unexpected time. Chapter 264. In the training courtyard outside of the Shen residence, Mo Qing was sparring with Shen Qiu's personal soldier Ah Qi. Ah Qi was currently one of Shen Qiu's subordinates with the best martial arts skills, but Mo Qing was able to fight evenly with him. In the beginning, when Shen Miao introduced Mo Qing to Shen Qiu also had the intention to test Mo Qing's abilities, and at the end of the test, Mo Qing was still quite good. Shen Qiu was naturally very happy. A strong general would not have weak soldiers, and if he had more strong soldiers under him, the reputation of the Shen family's army would be even more resounding. Ever since he recruited Mo Qing, Shen Qiu kept praising Shen Miao's foresight and occasionally pestered Shen Miao to accidentally discover such a talent in the marketplace, but was rejected by Shen Miao's supercilious eyes. In the previous lifetime there was only one commander of the guards, and from what Shen Qiu said, could it be that the streets and alleys were filled with commanders of the guards? After Ah Qi and Mo Qing finished a round of sparring, they were so tired that they were drenched in sweat. Ah Qi suddenly gulped down a large mouthful of water and said, "It is really refreshing to spar with Brother Mo. Brother Mo's swordsmanship is really superb and makes one envious." Mo Qing cupped his hands. Brother Ah Qi has overpraised. My swordsmanship is not considered superb. There is always someone better than you in the universe, and there are many experts in this world. Could it be that there is someone whose swordsmanship is better than Brother Mo? Ah Qi smiled. Then I really want to experience it. Mo Qing did not speak, but his mind was that night in Wulong Temple. He carried Shen Qing on his back and changed rooms with Shen Miao, thus changing the fates of both of them. That night, there was a black-clad person who came in from the window and easily snatched his sword in 5 moves. In that person's hands, he was as weak as a child, and he heard Shen Miao calling him Little Xia Marquis. That young man's swordsmanship was truly superb. Ah Qi sighed for a while before speaking. One do not know how delightful it is to kill the enemy together with Brother Mo on the battlefield. I am actually somewhat impatient. Unfortunately, General will stay in the Ding capital for half a year because of young lady. If one want to join hands to repel the enemy, one would have to wait for half a year. He looked at Mo Qing. Speaking of which, our family's young lady really has a discerning eye for heroes. It is really rare to find a person like Brother Mo. Young lady is an amazing person. Mo Qing said. After following Shen Miao for a long time, he did not like some of Shen Miao's actions. As a female, Shen Miao was cruel and heartless, without sympathy, vicious and cold, but it was impossible to hate her, because the people she dealt with were people who wanted to put her to death. Qing remembered that day when Shen Miao lifted the curtain of the horse carriage and asked him with a smile, "Are you willing to sell all your martial arts skills to my Shen family? A scholar would die for a bosom friend." From a certain aspect, Shen Miao was Qing's benefactor. Qi punched him. "I know, you are the person chosen by Miss, of course you will think well of her. Just protect her during the Jade Rabbit Festival tomorrow." Qing suddenly raised his head and looked up. "What?" Qi followed his gaze and said in confusion, "There's nothing there. Most likely I sensed wrongly." Qing shook his head and ignored the strange feeling in his heart just now. At the other side of the wall, there were two people squatting there. These two people were dressed in hemp clothes and wore bamboo hats that covered their faces so one could not see their appearance at a glance. One of them said, "This Shen residence is indeed full of talented people. Even a guard has such ability and almost discovered both of us." "Correct." The other person lowered his voice to discuss, "There are many guards outside the Shen residence and there are also Shen Exayan soldiers. It would be too risky to take action from inside and one feared that it would not be easy to succeed. One would also alert the enemy. If in the future Shen Miao is protected impenetrably, one feared that it would be more difficult to take action." The higher-ups had given the order and it was not easy to get some news. That person's companion said, "Once we capture her and get the result, this trip would not be considered as a waste. Both of us only need to wait to be promoted. How can one give up midway? Naturally one cannot give up." The bamboo hat person laughed. "Just now did the two guards not say that Shen Miao will be traveling during the Jade Rabbit Festival tomorrow? At that time there will be a surge of people and it would be easy to do something. At that time, one group of people will lure the Shen family away and another group of people will bring her away. Do it cleanly and neatly." That person's words were filled with ruthlessness. "In order to eliminate future troubles, tie her up and throw her into the lake after getting the news. Do not have any other ideas." "Naturally." Chapter 265. On the day of the Jade Rabbit Festival, it was indeed exceptionally lively. After Shen Miao had her dinner, Bai Lu and Shuangjiang hurriedly ran in and said to her, "Young lady, there are people setting off fireworks in the city. One heard that there will be continuous fireworks tonight and it will be very nice to look at." The anticipation in the words was not concealed at all. "What is there to panic about?" Guyu was combing Shen Miao's hair at the same time as she reprimanded, "One will have to go and see and there is no rush." Before the words were finished, one could hear Shen Qiu's laughing voice from outside. "Has younger sister tidied up? Father and mother are waiting for us at the front hall." Replying to eldest young master. Jingzhe replied from outside, "Young lady's hair is not combed yet. Trouble one to wait a while more." "How can a young lady's hair be combed for so long?" Shen Qiu muttered, "It is already as long as a soldier's armor." Finishing, he shouted towards the room, "Younger sister, I will go to the front hall to wait for you. You can come over yourself." Shen Miao complied through the window. Guyu just finished combing her hair and was picking and choosing in the box before finally finding a jade hairpin and inserted it into Shen Miao's hair. Shen Miao swept a glance at the bronze mirror and could not help but be startled. "Why is it this? This servant sees that this hairpin matches well with young lady's clothes." Guyu smiled. "Moreover, this hairpin is exquisitely made but not cumbersome. It is just right to match with today's single spiral hairpin." Shen Miao could not help but reach out to touch the hairpin on her head. That was the jade begonia hairpin that Xie Jingxing gave her. This hairpin was later appraised by Guyu and a few others and it was absolutely priceless. Shen Miao originally wanted to return it to Xie Jingxing but later dropped the thought as she thought that there would be a day where she would be strapped for money and could use it to exchange for some money to spend. But if Xie Jingxing knew about it, one did not know how angry he would be. Does young lady feel that this hairpin is not good? Guyu saw Shen Miao's hesitant look and said, why not change another one? There are a lot of jewelry that eldest young master sent over from the palace and most likely one can find some good-looking hairpins. No need. Shen Miao interrupted her, one fear that it will take more time to search. Let it be like this. It was just a hairpin, she thought. Guyu helped her to adjust her collar and put on a cloak for her before smiling, this is good. Do not forget the small heater. Jingzhe stuffed a hand warmer into her hands. When Shen Miao and entourage reached the main hall, everyone in the Shen residence was already present. Because in previous years it was always the Shen residents that went to the Jade Rabbit Festival together, it was the same this year. Chen Roqiu and Shen Wan were talking. Shen Yu was wearing a light pink 12-tattered fairy long dress and the hem of the dress was swaying. In such cold weather, what she was wearing inside was extremely thin and there was a pink peach-colored embroidered cloak on the outside which was good to look at but useless. Most likely it could not even withstand the wind, but she had an extremely satisfied look and when she saw Shen Miao coming, she smiled and called her, fifth younger sister. Shen Miao nodded her head at her and turned to look at Shen Gui's side. If one were to say that this year was different from previous years, it would be that Ren Wanyun and Shen Yuanbo were not around. In the past it was Ren Wanyun who took care of Shen Yuanbo, but now Ren Wanyun had lost her mind and could not go out. Shen Yuanbo was too young and there were so many kidnappers on the streets, so old Shen Furen wanted Shen Yuanbo to stay in the residence with her. Shen Yuan stood by Shen Wan's side and behind Shen Wan, Wan Yinyang was holding a young female's hand and that young female was looking over. This was the Shu daughter of the second household, Shen Dongling. Shen Dongling was wearing an apricot-colored long jacket and most likely it was because of the fear of the cold that she mentioned. That jacket was extremely thick and big but it made her look very thin. Actually looking at it seriously, her facial features were as beautiful as Wan Yinyang, but one did not know why her temperament was so light that it was almost invisible. She did not greet Shen Miao and only looked at her silently. One did not know if she was shy or indifferent. Chapter 266. Shen Miao retracted her gaze but heard Shen Qiu making a ruckus at the side. Younger sister, you are getting more and more beautiful now. Brat. Shen Xan gave Shen Qiu a kick when he heard that. When was your younger sister not beautiful? Luo Shuayan also smiled as she walked to Shen Miao's side and held her hand. Our Jiao Jiao is also a big young lady. Everyone's eyes in the hall looked towards Shen Miao with some unclear meaning. A year ago, Shen Miao was still a silly eldest sister who was wearing gold and silver and had makeup that was thicker than the white walls. Now she was wearing a purplish gold embroidered cotton padded clothes and her cloak was also the color of peonies with exquisite lace embroidered on it. Her hair was combed into a single spiral bun and there was a jade hairpin in the bun. There was no jingling of ornaments but there was a kind of gorgeous air of nobility. Her facial features were delicate and clear and her eyes were as clear as a little beast. If this appearance was gentle and graceful, it would be full of femininity, but one did not know why she stood dignified like the bright moon in the 9 heavens, making one have a feeling of not being able to look at her. Compared to all the females in the room, one felt that the entire room was filled with mediocre rouge and powder. A trace of jealousy flashed in Shen Yu's eyes. She had thought that Shen Miao, who was the most incomparable to her in the residence, had unknowingly snatched away her limelight. Shen Yu was most confident in her own scholarly elegance and beauty, but when she saw Shen Miao today, she actually felt a sense of inferiority. She raised her head to look at Chen Roqiu, hoping to see a little disdain toward Shen Miao from her mother's eyes, but she also saw a trace of graveness in Chen Roqiu's eyes which made her heart even colder. Wan Yinyang sighed in her heart and unconsciously held Shen Dongling's hand tighter. She did not have any other thoughts and only felt that Shin Miao was indeed a D daughter. The bearing of a D daughter was just different. No matter how intelligent her own daughter was, she had been shut up in the courtyard for so many years, and in terms of nobility, she was still unable to be compared to Shin Miao. The males in the room did not have any reaction, and other than Shin Xan and Shin Qiu, Shin Gui and Shin Wan at best only frowned. As for Shin Yuan, he was staring at Shin Miao and no one knew what he was thinking about. Chen Ruoqiu changed the topic. Since everyone is here, let's set off now. Old Shin Furen was old and naturally would not be able to see such a scene. In the Shin residence, only old Shin Furen, Shin Yuanbo, Ren Wan Yun and the concubines of the second household were left. The others wanted to go to the streets to watch the excitement of the Jade Rabbit Festival. If it was in previous years, naturally they would be talking and laughing wittily along the way, but this year, because of Shin Miao's big fire in the ancestral hall, Shin Xian and Shin Qiu almost deliberately kept a distance from the other two and only spoke to Luo Shuiyan. The guards of the Shin residence followed behind. In fact, every year in the Ding capital, in order to protect the safety of the common people and to prevent bandits from causing trouble when the crowd was crowded, the city guards would increase the number of people patrolling the streets, thus it was considered safe to stroll around. Shin Xian did not speak to Shin Gui and Shin Wan, so Shin Gui and Shin Wan did not invite a rebuff, and the two brothers chatted on their own. Shin Yu used to walk together with Shin Qing and Shin Miao, as Shin Miao was able to set off her educated and reasonable character. Now that Shin Miao was not willing to pay attention to her, Shin Yu was also not willing to let Shin Miao steal the limelight, so she went to look for Shin Dongling to talk. When Wan Yinyang saw that Shin Yu was willing to get close, naturally she was extremely happy. It was just that one did not know if Shin Dongling was shy, as she did not seem to be enthusiastic towards Shin Yu and instead looked somewhat timid. After a while, Shin Yu also lost interest. This group of people strolled on the streets and the atmosphere was somewhat awkward. To say that it was not harmonious, it was indeed the entire residence's people walking together. To say that it was harmonious, it was clear that the few of them had their own formation. Chapter 267. As Shin Miao was walking, she was seriously looking at the lanterns and riddles on the streets. Shin Xian and the rest did not like to guess riddles because they were all rough people from military families, so how would they be able to settle down to guess such genteel things? Using Shin Qiu's words, if younger sister likes that lantern, tomorrow eldest brother will go to the capital to find a master to carve the exact same one for you. Why waste so much effort? Shin Qiu was unable to understand the elegance of Chen Ruoqiu and entourage. After Chen Ruoqiu and the rest finished guessing the lantern riddles, and when they were walking forward, Wan Yinyang suddenly spoke to Shin Gui, Master, one heard that there will be a Jade Rabbit fairy dancing at the Wanli Lake tonight. This year the Jade Rabbit lantern will also be placed at the lakeside, so let us go over there to take a look. When Chen Ruoqiu heard it, she frowned and said softly, that Jade Rabbit fairy is from Bao Xiang Lu, and one fear that it would not be good to bring along young ladies in our residence. What kind of place was Bao Xiang Lu? It was the biggest money-squandering establishment in the Ding capital, and the young ladies there were all warm and fragrant. How many men would abandon their wives and throw away 1,000 gold just to sleep with the young ladies of Bao Xiang Lu? Mentioning Bao Xiang Lu, at least the main household would feel ashamed. However, no matter how much those Furens and Furens despised it, it was unable to change the fact that the young ladies of Bao Xiang Lu were all talented. Thus this year's Jade Rabbit Fairy still fell to the young ladies of Bao Xiang Lu to act. Second Furen. Wan Yinyang softly said, even so, it is only an act. One think that in front of so many people, that Jade Rabbit Fairy would not do anything inappropriate and is only watching the bustle, so there is no need to be so serious. Wan Yinyang originally did not want to fight with Qin Roqiu, but like Ren Wan Yun, she could not bear to see Qin Roqiu's aloof and virtuous appearance, always putting on the airs of a scholarly family. Compared to Ren Wan Yun, Wan Yinyang hated Qin Roqiu even more because she herself came from an opera troupe. Qin Roqiu suppressing that Bao Xiang Lu today was undoubtedly looking down on her style. Both of their tit-for-tat was heard by everyone, and in a moment the atmosphere became somewhat interesting. Males would not intervene in the dispute between females, so Shen Dongling only held Wan Yinyang's hands and tightly shut her lips without speaking. Shen Yu had the heart to argue for Qin Roqiu but felt that it would be beneath her identity as a D daughter, thus no one spoke for a moment. Who said that going to the Wanli Lake is to see the Jade Rabbit Fairy? In the silence, Shen Miao spoke softly. It is not every day that one can see the grand occasion of tens of thousands of people releasing lanterns. Moreover, there was no choice whether one was born rich or poor. There was no need to look down on others because of that. No matter what her identity is, she is the Jade Rabbit Fairy today. A person with a clear heart, why should she care about these external things? Everyone was stunned for a moment. Shen Xian was the first to laugh. Jiao Jiao is right. We have no choice but to be born rich and poor. What is the point of looking down on others? Luo Shuayan also smiled. They were fighting on the battlefield. Some of the soldiers in the army were from the royal families, but most of them were commoners. Some of them couldn't even afford to eat, and some of the elders in their families were about to starve to death. When it came to their origins, they all had their own hardships. Thus they would never look down on the poor. Shen Miao's words were very much in line with both of their hearts. Younger sister. Shen Qiu patted Shen Miao's shoulders. Your tone is that of a great person who cares about the world. This kind of breadth of mind, even eldest brother is ashamed of my inferiority. Even though she knew that Shen Qiu was teasing her, Shen Miao was slightly absent-minded. In the previous life, she married Fu Xiu and became the Empress. Previously it was indeed because of love, but as the Empress, the responsibilities that she bore were no less than others. The words motherly model of the world meant that all the commoners could live and work in peace and contentment. The higher-ups must love their own people. This was something that Fu Xiu taught her, even though Fu Xiu himself did not do it. Chapter 268. As they echoed each other, Qin Roqiu's face turned green and white. Shen Xian praised Shen Miao for being frank. Wasn't it setting off her hypocrisy? Shen Wan's expression was also somewhat gloomy, and Shen Yu was already exploding with anger, but she restrained herself from saying a few sarcastic words to Shen Miao. Wan Yinyang thought that Shen Miao's words were to help her, and a trace of joy surfaced on her face. When Shen Dongling saw it, she shook her head slightly. Shen Yuan still had a sneering appearance, and Shen Gui also pretended not to know. Then let's go to the Wanli Lake. Luo Shuayan ordered. She was a person who was used to being a female general, so it was natural for her to give orders. No matter how unwilling the Shen family's people were, they could only follow because of the Shen family's army guards behind them. The Wanli Lake was located in the west of the center of the Ding capital, and the entire lake was embedded in the heart of the city. In the spring, it was like a piece of jade, and when it came to winter, snow would fall on the surface of the lake and there would be boats cruising on the lake. It was quite interesting to drink wine and discuss history. Today there was also light snow, and under the illumination of the thousands of lights, the snowflakes were like crystal-clear jade flowers that fell from the sky. The willow trees by the lakeside were all covered with snowflakes, and for a moment one was unable to differentiate which was the snow and which was the lights. Before reaching the Wanli Lake, one could hear the sound of fireworks. When one raised one's head, one could see that in the dark of the night, the large expanse of fireworks almost dazzled one's eyes. There was a tide of people below. some were lovers holding hands or some were a happy and harmonious family. All of them raised their heads to look at the fireworks, looking at this moment of eternity. Young lady, quickly look. Jingzhi said excitedly, that is the fireworks by the Wanli Lake. One heard that the fireworks tonight will be set off for the entire night. It is really beautiful. Guyu also muttered. Ha! The Ding capital is indeed bustling. Shinqiu said to Luo Shuiyan, it is much more fun than our northwestern region. Luo Shuiyan was also sighing as she walked. As she walked forward, she suddenly saw the crowd running forward and one did not know what they were anxious about. Shin Xian grabbed a male that ran past him and asked, this brother, what is in front? Why is everyone running forward? The Jade Rabbit Fairy has arrived. That person said, everyone went to see the Jade Rabbit Fairy. He took a look at Shin Xian and suddenly said, brother must be new here. This year the Jade Rabbit Fairy is disguised by Bao Xiang Lu's young lady Luing. Brother should quickly go over. Finishing, he ran away happily. Shin Xian turned back and Luo Shuiyan said in a lukewarm tone, still not going to see that young lady Luing. Furen is not saying. Shin Xian wiped the sweat off his forehead, I have not seen enough of Furen. What kind of person is young lady Luing? Definitely not as beautiful and generous as Furen. Even so, since they were already here, Luo Shuiyan did not want to spoil everyone's mood. She continued walking forward. After squeezing through the crowd, one suddenly heard someone shouting, young lady Luing is here. Young lady Luing is here. Shin Miao's stature was too small and she could not see up, so Shin Qiu pulled her to the stone platform at the side and placed her down before standing beside Shin Miao. Shin Miao raised her head and saw a flower carriage surrounded by the crowd. It was winter, but the float was decorated with fresh flowers. It was enough to show the effort of the person behind it. The flowers were beautiful purple and brilliant red, so for a moment they couldn't see them clearly. But at this moment, they could clearly see the people inside the flower carriage. It was a young woman in the prime of her youth. She wore a white cotton dress and a velvet cloak over her head. Her hair was combed into a flying fairy bun, making her look like a fairy. She had delicate eyebrows and teeth that were like braided shells. What was most attractive about her was her pair of long and narrow eyes. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, which added a touch of charm for no reason. It was cold and tempting, light but heavy. It was as if the wind around them had a hint of ambiguous fragrance with her arrival. This Jade Rabbit Fairy was said to be an immortal, but there was a hint of the mortal world. She was said to be in the mortal world, but her enchanting coldness was a color that the mortal world did not have. Chapter 269. Luing was not born to be very beautiful and in terms of facial features, she was slightly inferior to Wan Yinyang, but that kind of cold enchanting in her bones made one's heart itch. Whether this Jade Rabbit Fairy was an immortal or a demon, it made one ponder, but this kind of tone to an ordinary male was enough to captivate one's soul. Shin Miao's eyes stopped on Luing for a moment but turned her head to look at the surroundings, wanting to see if that person had arrived. After looking one round, she did not discover anything, and when Shin Qiu saw her actions, he asked curiously, "Younger sister, what are you looking at? Why is older brother not looking at this young lady Luing?" Shin Miao directly changed the topic. Even though Shin Qiu was not stupid, he would not think much whenever he met Shin Miao. When he heard Shin Miao's question, he answered, "I do not like this." Shin Miao raised her eyebrows and said, "Then what does older brother like?" Shin Qiu was unable to speak. Shin Miao felt that Shin Qiu's embarrassed look was very interesting and wanted to laugh. In the previous life, Shin Qiu married that vicious sister-in-law, and from the beginning to the end, he most likely did not meet any young lady that he admired. Now that he was reborn, he did not know who was the one that was fated to be his sister-in-law in this lifetime. Let's go. Shen Qiu stretched out his hand towards Shen Miao, wanting to pull her down from the stone platform. Just now, in order to let Shen Miao see that young lady Luing clearly, Shen Qiu brought her to this side and was separated by 10 meters from Shen Xian and the rest. Now that she had finished watching the bustle, naturally she would return to Shen Xian's side and go to the Wanli Lake to release the lanterns. Just as Shen Miao was about to jump down, she suddenly heard a child crying. Shen Qiu also heard it, and both of them turned their heads to look and saw that a few meters away, there was a 3 or 4-year-old child hanging upside down from a shop on the shore. Most likely the child was mischievous and climbed to a high place to watch the bustle but ended up slipping. Both his hands were tightly holding onto the ladder and half of his body was hanging outside. If he were to fall like this, one feared that it would be a big problem. The surrounding people had already gone to get a ladder, but the child could not hold on for long. Seeing that the little hands were getting weaker and weaker, the child's mother had already covered her face and cried. "Younger sister, wait for me here." When Shen Qiu saw that, he quickly instructed Shen Miao. Thinking that it was only a few meters away from the stone platform and he knew martial arts, he immediately headed over. Before he reached, the child's hand went limp and he fell to the ground. The surrounding people cried out in alarm. Shen Qiu's toes tapped lightly and he stepped on the pillar beside him. He soared into the air and caught the child, barely saving the child's life. The surrounding people were all applauding his move. Shen Qiu returned the child to the child's mother, and the child's mother repeatedly apologized to him with tears in her eyes, making Shen Qiu somewhat embarrassed. It was not easy to appease this pair of mother and son, and Shen Qiu prepared to return to the stone platform to fetch Shen Miao. Because he was only a few meters away, he was stunned the moment he turned his head. The stone platform was empty. There was not a single person on it. Shen Qiu's heart tightened, and with 3 quick steps, he forcefully pushed through the crowd and ran to the front of the stone platform. There was no one there, not even a trace. Shen Qiu's heart still harbored hope and looked around before calling out loudly, "Jiao Jiao." But no one answered him. He grabbed a person standing not far from the stone platform and asked, "Where's the little girl who was standing here just now? Did you see the little girl here?" That person replied impatiently, "What little girl?" "No, no." Finishing, he looked at him again. "Could it be that your family's young lady was abducted by others? There are many kidnappers in this Jade Rabbit Festival, and if there are no guards, the residence's young lady would be separated from others. Then 8 or 9 out of 10 would be abducted by kidnappers." Shen Qiu's body trembled violently. The 8-chi tall burly man, who did not even blink his eyes in front of the enemy on the battlefield, at this moment, suddenly changed color. Chapter 270. On the street beside the lake of Wanli, there were 2 people walking in the crowd. One was wearing a blue robe and a jade crown with an imposing appearance, while the other was wearing a purple robe and had a handsome face like a painting. These 2 people were not bad, especially that purple-clad youth. There was a kind of elegance and nobility in his actions, and there was a faint smile on his lips which made the surrounding females to look over from time to time. "How long are you going to follow me?" Xie Jingxing asked. Su Mingfeng shook his head. "Such a festival, as a good friend, one should naturally travel together. Why are you not willing?" "I still have things to do. An invitation is not as good as a chance encounter. Since we met, then travel together with me. How many times have we not traveled together during the Jade Rabbit Festival?" Su Mingfeng was dissatisfied. "You are becoming more and more mysterious now." Today Su Mingfeng was traveling with the Su family and coincidentally met Xie Jingxing alone, so he pulled Xie Jingxing along. The relationship between the Su family and the Xia family was good, thus Master Su would not say anything. At this moment Master Su and the rest were walking in front while Su Mingfeng and Xie Jingxing were walking behind. Su Mingfeng asked, "You came out alone again today. Your father is not angry?" The Jade Rabbit Festival was usually a family trip and now there was only Xie Jingxing alone. Without thinking, it was definitely Xie Jingxing who came out alone. Xie Ding most likely exploded with anger. There was no choice as he had such a son. It felt like he came over to collect a debt in the previous lifetime. With his son accompanying, "I will not join in the fun." Xie Jingxing said indifferently, "I am not that free." Su Mingfeng shook his head, "You are really free and easy." Just as he was speaking, he saw a group of people walking over. Su Mingfeng was surprised for a moment, "Is that not General Shin?" Xie Jingxing looked up and saw Shin Xian hurriedly walking over and following closely behind him was Shin Qiu and Luo Shuiyan. Behind them was a group of guards and everyone's expression was very heavy and nervous. Su Mingfeng touched his chin, "It seems that the Shin family is in some trouble. Why is there such an expression?" In the midst of a crowd brimming with joy, the Shin family's expression was very abrupt. One did not need to think to know that it was definitely not a good thing. Master Su also saw them and stopped to chat with them. Xie Jingxing and Su Mingfeng did not go forward and only stood far away. They were all martial artists and could hear each other's conversation. Master Su asked, "Where is General Shin going?" Casually stroll around." Shin Xian said, "It is just that wife's body suddenly felt unwell and had to return to the residence first." Master Su, "Have a good time." Finished speaking, he cupped his hands and left without looking back. The Shin family and the Su family did not have the same political views. Seeing that Shin Xian did not want to talk to him, Master Su naturally did not feel comfortable in his heart. He was too lazy to meddle in other people's business and walked forward. It was Su Mingfeng who said, "General Shin is so arrogant, but why does it look like something big has happened? Even if Shin Furen is not feeling well, there is no need to bring so many guards." Xie Jingxing's eyes swept across the group of guards and said, "Fifth young lady of the Shin family is not present." Su Mingfeng was surprised. "Shin Miao is not present." Xie Jingxing looked at the Shin family's entourage. With Shin Miao's relationship with the other two households, it was impossible for her to abandon her mother at this time and enjoy the lanterns with the other two households. And in this entourage, there was no Shin Miao's figure. It could not be that Shin Miao did not even leave the residence today. For such a big festival, even if Shin Miao was unwilling, Shin Xian would not leave her alone in the residence. Just at this moment, one suddenly heard a soft voice, "Older sister Shin is missing." Xie Jingxing lowered his head. Su Minglang did not know when did he slip away from Master Su's side and ran to Su Mingfeng's side. He pulled his eldest brother's clothes and repeated, "Just now I secretly ran over to their place and heard those people saying to find older sister Shin as soon as possible." Su Minglang was a glutinous rice dumpling that could be ignored in the crowd. It was because he was bold that he was not afraid of being separated by the crowd and not being able to find his way back. They said that perhaps older sister Shin was kidnapped by kidnappers. Su Minglang continued, "Eldest brother, let us go and rescue older sister Shin." Missing. Xie Jingxing thoughtfully looked at the back of the Shin family's entourage that were far away and suddenly said to Su Mingfeng, "Do not make this matter public. I will leave first." He then looked down at Su Minglang and smiled evilly, "If you were to speak about the matter of Shin Miao not being seen, I will sell you to the kidnappers." Chapter 271. During the Jade Rabbit Festival in the Ding capital, every year there would be numerous young ladies who would be abducted by kidnappers. If it was a male child, it would be better. Most likely they would be sold to those remote places that were unable to give birth to children, to be a son. If it was a female child or a young female, then it would be miserable. Those who did not have good looks would be passed around a few times by the traffickers and sold to a large family to be a servant girl. If they were good-looking, they would not be as good as those with average looks. Perhaps they would be sold to an opera troupe, or perhaps they would be sold to a brothel, or simply become a Yangzhou skinny horse. After being trained for a few years, they would become a pet for the nobles to play with. Among these females, there was no lack of large families, but when it came to kidnappers, there was no difference in family background. No matter if one was a young lady from a large family or a commoner, once one was in the hands of a kidnapper, everyone would be the same. Shin young lady was abducted by kidnappers? In the room, Jiu Shu suddenly stood up and paced back and forth, showing some worry. Shin young lady is not bad looking and has an outstanding bearing. One fear that if she falls into the hands of kidnappers, she would definitely be sold. Even though I also like young lady Xiaoyao, I do not wish for Shin young lady to become a young lady. Third Xia older brother, do we go and save her? Gao Yang scoffed at Ji Yushu's words, are you alright? With Shin Miao's means, how could she be abducted by kidnappers? Moreover, kidnappers would only pick single young ladies or lost children. Shin Qiu and Shin Xayan are not far from Shin Miao, and those kidnappers are not fools. How would they pick such a big thorn? Shin Miao's looks are also not an outstanding beauty, so it is not worth it. These words were not wrong. When kidnappers abduct people, they would do it when people were not paying attention. Even if they abducted and sold a young lady from an official's family, they would also pick a time when that young lady was not around. But the people who investigated the news said that at that time Shin Miao was by the Wanli Lake, and at that time the crowd was surging. Even though it was easy for the kidnappers to make their move, but if they were not careful and were discovered, they would not be able to escape with so many people. Such a risky matter, if it was for an outstanding beauty, it would still be justifiable. Shin Miao was after all a young lady, and even though she was not bad, it was not to the point where one would lose one's rationality. The most important thing was that at that time Shin Qiu and Shin Xayan were not far away. Since ancient times, bullying the weak and fearing the strong was the norm that bad people followed. Obviously, knowing that Shin Xayan's family did not look like they were good to provoke, how would the kidnapper find trouble for himself? It was a risky and unprofitable business, unless the kidnapper was a fool too. Ji Yushu was suddenly enlightened, so to speak, it was not done by kidnappers. Who could it be? This is obviously directed at Shin young lady. Could it be the remaining party of Prince Yu residents? As he spoke, he shook his head. Prince Yu's people did not know that the extermination of the entire family was related to Shin Miao. Could it be the Shin family's people? I heard that the Shin family is not on good terms. Could it be someone from the other branches? Xie Jingxing, who had been sitting silently by the side, stood up and said, "It's them." They. Gao Yang suddenly became nervous and looked at Xie Jingxing. They have already found out. I don't think so. Xie Jingxing shook his head. I was waiting for them to make a move, but nothing happened. Now he understood that they might have known about the secret chamber and did not know what methods they used to know that Shin Miao was present that day. Our identity has not been exposed, so they planned to find out from Shin Miao's mouth. They were sent by you. Ji Yushu was surprised for a moment before he felt a headache. Oh no. With those people's methods, Shin young lady would not feel good if she landed in their hands. Let the MOU Army's secret department come out to search. Search along the surroundings of the Wanli Lake. There are many eyes and they should not have gone far. Xie Jingxing said in a deep voice. The casual expression on his face was completely gone, and his solemn look was not like that of a 17 or 18-year-old youth, but had an unfathomable chill. Chapter 272. It is not good for the MOU army to move out now. Gao Yang frowned. Now there are too many people watching you in the Ding capital, and if the higher-ups were to be alerted, one feared that the trouble would not be small. It is better to let people guard the city gates, and tomorrow morning send your residence's people to quietly search the city. It would be better to beat the grass and startle the snake now. Still need to wait for a night. Ji Shu jumped up. If one wait for a night, Shen young lady would be long dead. Ji Shu was after all young and impetuous and appreciated Shen Miao. Different from Gao Yang, who already had the cruelty and ruthlessness of a politician, in some aspects, Ji Shu still retained a youth's precious sincerity and naivety. Gao Yang was angry. What time is it already and you are still thinking of Shen Miao? If one is not careful, our identities will be exposed. Now send the secret department's people to search. Xie Jingxing said coldly, I do not want to say it a second time. Third Xia. Gao Yang looked at him. You want to destroy the big plan because of a girl. Do not forget what you said. Gao Yang, pay attention to your identity. Xie Jingxing suddenly snapped. His brows were slightly wrinkled and the ink in his peach blossom eyes was even deeper than the Ding capital's night. The sudden anger that was emitted made Gao Yang could not help but tremble. When Ji Shu saw the situation, he quickly smoothed things over. Today's matter happened suddenly and no one had expected it. But perhaps the situation is not that bad. First think about what is going on. Xie Jingxing was silent for a moment before saying, not for anyone but to place such drastic measures in my territory, it really makes one uncomfortable. Since they have the guts to come, tonight let them have a taste of what is called no return. The Wanli Lake was crowded with people and the cheers and laughter drowned out all other sounds. The matter of an official's young lady disappearing did not seem to cause much of a commotion. This was of course because the Shen family did not spread it out, but even if it was spread out, one feared that people would only be busy admiring the grand occasion in front of them. The Jade Rabbit Fairy had already finished her dance and the males were dazed from watching it while the females were secretly cursing the vixen. The huge Jade Rabbit lantern was made of snow-white silk cloth. It was coated with a thick layer of grease and was painted with the image of the Jade Rabbit playing with joy. It was decorated with bright and dim candles, slowly floating on the surface of the Wanli Lake. The people cheered and ran to the edge of the lake to put down the lanterns they had made. The lanterns were filled with their wishes for the coming year. They rolled them into small strips of paper and placed them in the lanterns before gently pushing them into the water. Light snow started to fall from the sky. However, the lights on the Wanli Lake were bright and the fireworks in the sky were bright. For a moment, it was hard to tell if it was in the sky or under the water. Such a beautiful scene that was brightly lit, even during the previous Jade Rabbit Festival, it was a rare sight. There were a few exquisitely carved pleasure boats floating in the middle of the lake. Usually, the nobles would book these pleasure boats to drink and make merry. Today, no one knew who was on these pleasure boats. Because the lake was filled with lanterns, the pleasure boats did not attract much attention. An unlit pleasure boat was leisurely drifting downstream on the surface of the Wanli Lake. There were fewer people downstream and the lanterns were all drifting along with the waves. From afar, the pleasure boat seemed to be surrounded by those lanterns. However, the further it went downstream, the further away it was from the city, and the fewer people there were. In the end, there was practically no one there. Shen Miao was sitting in the innermost room of the pleasure boat and looked coldly at the two people in front of her. In the dim pleasure boat, there was a small oil lamp that was lit. Shen Miao's mouth was stuffed with a piece of rag and her hands and feet were tied up so well that she could not break free. The two people on the pleasure boat were dressed in hemp garments and looked very unfamiliar. A tall and skinny man stood at the bow of the boat and looked around. He then walked into the cabin and nodded to the shorter man, saying, "All right, there's no one here." Chapter 273. That short man laughed and stretched out his hand to pull out the rag in Shen Miao's mouth. Shen, young lady, there is no one here, so do not shout. If you shout, we still have the time to kill you and run. Shen Miao's eyes moved slightly, but she did not speak. These people did the opposite, and the pleasure boat floated downstream in public. Shen Xian and the rest would only search for her whereabouts on the shore and would not think that she was in the middle of the Wanli Lake under the watchful eyes of everyone. Just now, when she was standing on the stone platform waiting for Shen Qiu to come back, she was dragged away from behind with her mouth and nose covered. The two of them moved so quickly that she didn't even have time to react before she was tied up and thrown onto the boat. Seeing that Shen Miao did not speak, the short one was also quite satisfied. The tall and skinny one walked over and sat opposite her. His eyes were very gloomy as he said, "Shen, young lady, straightforward people do not speak in riddles. We looked for you to inquire about a matter." The tall and skinny one exuded a very unique temperament. This kind of temperament was not like an ordinary bandit. He said, "That day you have already gone to the secret chamber of Prince Yu residence." Shen Miao's eyes flashed. When she was abducted, she thought of many possibilities. Perhaps it was the second household or third household people, perhaps it was Shen Yuan or Prince Yu's old subordinates. She even thought about Fu Xiu, but she did not expect that the target was that secret chamber. Other than Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang, no one else knew about the secret chamber. Could it be that Fu Xiu knew about it a few years in advance? But since the other party came prepared, it was obvious that they had clearly understood her background. Shen Miao did not hide it and replied, "Yes. That day eldest brother was handling matters in Prince Yu residence and I was waiting in the tea room. I accidentally discovered that secret chamber and went to take a look out of curiosity." The two people opposite looked at each other and the short one said, "Then you should have met someone in the secret chamber." "Who was that person?" Shen Miao's fingers slightly shrunk. It was not because of the secret chamber's secrets or the things in the secret chamber, but it was actually for the people inside. Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang. These people came for Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang. Shen Miao's mind quickly turned. These people only knew that there was someone else in the secret chamber that day but did not know who that person was. Perhaps Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang were hiding something, and if she were to say it out, Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang's secret would be exposed. She looked at him in confusion. Someone else. The tall and thin man looked at her viciously. "Miss Shen, don't play tricks in front of us. When you entered the secret chamber that day, we believed that it was a coincidence. However, the things in the secret chamber had already been taken away. Who did you meet in the secret chamber? Tell me and I'll spare your life." Shen Miao stared at him, but her mind was quickly calculating. She only knew about the secret chamber of Prince Yu residence because of her previous life, so in these people's eyes, she could only accidentally discover the location of the secret chamber. These people might be investigating something, but they didn't know who they were. Xie Jingxing and Gao Yang were the people they were looking for. She shook her head. "When I entered the secret chamber that day, there was no one else inside. As for the thing you mentioned, I didn't see it either. Perhaps before I went in, those people you mentioned had already left." "Impossible." The tall and thin man looked at her and suddenly revealed a cruel smile. "Miss Shen, since you do not speak, then one must let you suffer a bit." When the words were spoken, that short man's eyes brightened and a hand reached out to touch Shen Miao's face. There was a somewhat lascivious look on his face as he said, "Little beauty's skin is really smooth. Why not wait for you to serve older brother and perhaps you will be able to remember." Finishing, he went to unbutton Shen Miao's clothes. Chapter 274. If you touch me, I will definitely bite my tongue and commit suicide. You will not be able to find out anything. Shin Miao lightly said, I have lost my innocence and my heart would be like dead ashes. In despair, do you think that you still have a chance to get information out of me? When the words were said, the short one's hand suddenly stopped and turned to look at the skinny and tall one. The skinny and tall one stared at Shin Miao and asked, You know who it is? Shin Miao gently smiled, Perhaps I can still remember. The short one was somewhat dumbfounded and the skinny and tall one's eyes were gloomy and uncertain. Perhaps Shin Miao's overly calm attitude made them somewhat unprepared, or perhaps they were surprised that Shin Miao was able to turn around and threaten the other party in such a situation. There was no female who did not care about their innocence, but Shin Miao's appearance was like a hoodlum on the streets. Correct? If Shin Miao really knew who the person in the secret chamber was, once she was touched, Shin Miao, who was filled with hatred towards them, would most likely not reveal the truth for the rest of her life. Shin Miao's eyes were slightly cold. Everyone would have their own weakness. These two people opposite seemed to want to know who the person in the secret chamber was, and now she was perhaps the only person in this world who knew the whereabouts. If she was a delicate official's young lady, she might be scared and tell the truth. Unfortunately, she was Empress Shin, who had gone through many hardships in the inner palace. What do you want to think? The short one did not touch her again and changed to a friendly look, Say who that person is and we will promise you. His tone was like coaxing a child. Shin Miao did not even blink as she said, Who are you? Both of them were startled for a moment before the skinny and tall one sneered, What benefits is there for you to know who both of us are? Perhaps I will be able to remember who that person is. Shin Miao smiled as she looked at him. You are delaying time. Shin Miao declined to comment. The short one suddenly stood up and slapped Shin Miao's mouth without even thinking. It was as if his patience had finally run out as he said, Smelly girl, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Do not talk nonsense with her. Shin Xan's soldiers are outside and we cannot go out. Bring her back first and after returning. His smile was somewhat distorted, naturally there will be ways to make her speak the truth. He bent down and touched Shin Miao's face with his disgusting hand. Little girl, Grandpa treated you kindly just now to save trouble. Since you don't want to live, don't blame others. Shin Miao's eyes turned cold and suddenly raised the knife in her hand to stab the other person's face. That short person was caught off guard and was slashed on his face by Shin Miao and blood immediately flowed out. Behind Shin Miao, one did not know when the ropes binding her hands and feet had been removed. She was used to hiding a dagger in her sleeve. Now that this dagger was taken out, it was a surprise. After rowing for a while, she ran out of the boat and shouted, Help! Just as she reached the cabin, she was violently grabbed by the hand, dragged in, and thrown to the ground. Her entire back knocked against the wooden table on the ship. She gasped in pain, and the ship shook a few times. Her reaction was fast and without saying anything, she immediately stood up and ran out again. The tall and skinny man sneered and kicked her kneecap, and that was a heart-wrenching pain. Shin Miao recovered to her senses and raised the dagger in her hands to poke that person's eyes. The tall and skinny man jumped in shock and dodged to the side, avoiding the tip of her dagger. He scolded the vicious woman and snatched the dagger from her hands. Shin Miao endured the pain in her legs and used her hands to climb to the cabin's window and jumped down without even blinking. Want to run? The tall and skinny man sneered and did not hesitate to throw the dagger in his hands over, and it went straight into Shin Miao's calf. Even though it did not go deep, a line of bright red blood quickly appeared on the surface of the lake. Chapter 275. Shin Miao knew how to swim, but in this cold winter of the 12th lunar month, the Wanli Lake's water was bone-chilling, and once one entered it, one would feel that one's entire body was a block of ice, and after struggling to move a few times, one would feel that one's entire body could no longer move. That skinny and tall one was about to jump into the water to fish Shen Miao out, since Shen Miao was the one who knew the whereabouts of the people in the secret chamber. But before he could take action, he heard an inexplicable sound of firecrackers coming from the horizon, and when he looked up, he saw a firework lighting up in the west. The situation has changed. The short one wiped off the blood stains on his face and said, "Retreat. Bring the person away first." The skinny and tall one scolded and was about to jump into the lake when one did not know that the boat suddenly jolted, and one did not know when two black-clad people were standing at the bow of the boat. The shoulders of the two black-clad people had golden embroidered eagle patterns. The short one cried out involuntarily, "MOU Army. Why is there the MOU Army here?" Before the two of them could recover to their senses, the two black-clad people were already in front of them. A silver light flashed past and the two of them had a look of horror on their faces before they slowly fell down. In the lake, Shen Miao was still violently churning. From the words of the short and tall one just now, it was not just the two of them alone. It seemed that there was another force behind them, and it sounded like the force was rather large. Shen Miao had an intuition that was beyond imagination when it came to such matters. If she fell into the hands of these two people, she would naturally be able to think of a way to escape, but if she fell into the hands of that force, even if she died outside, the Shen family would never be able to find the murderer. But she did not expect that this desperate jump would actually trap herself in a dead end. Those two people did not come down to save her, and the lake water was ice cold. Could it be that she would die here? Her head started to feel heavy and her ears could not hear a buzzing sound, as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. It was obvious that the light from the surface of the water was in front of her and she could see the bright lights from the lanterns flowing down the river, but she could not catch it and could not see it. Just when her eyes were about to blur, she suddenly saw a figure swimming over from afar. That person's body was strong and vigorous. In the bright lake water, it was as if a god had descended from the heavens, bringing with him the light as he swam towards her. That person swam in front of Shen Miao and hugged her waist as he swam towards the surface of the water. In such a world of ice and snow, the lake water was bone-chilling and it was difficult for one person to swim, but it was easy for him to carry another person. When he swam to the front of the pleasure boat, he lifted Shen Miao up and threw her onto the boat before flipping himself up. Shen Miao choked on a few mouthfuls of water and did not get up after boarding the boat. She only pinched her throat and coughed a few times. However, she saw the figure in front of her turn. When she looked up, she saw that the person was also dripping wet from head to toe. There was no longer the playful expression on his face as he looked at her with a frown. It was Xie Jingxing. Seeing Xie Jingxing at this moment, Shen Miao did not even have the thought of being surprised. Those two people were here for Xie Jingxing and it was assumed that Xie Jingxing himself knew the news, thus he rushed over. She struggled to prop herself up and saw that there were two more corpses in the cabin. They were the skinny and tall man and the short man from before. Two black-clothed men walked out from the depths of the cabin. One of them walked to Xie Jingxing's side and whispered something. Xie Jingxing waved his hand and the two men left with the two corpses. Before they left, they even cleaned up the blood stains in the cabin. Shen Miao did not bother to think who these two people were, as even a fool would be able to guess that they were Xie Jingxing's people. She moved her body and felt that there was no part of her body that was not sore. She had been soaking in the ice water for half a moment and was shivering from the cold. Previously she was thrown by the skinny tall one several times and her back was in pain. The most painful part was probably her calf. She lowered her head and looked at her skirt. The skirt was stuck to her body and there was a flower of blood on her calf. It was mixed with the red embroidery on her skirt and it was not clear. That was the wound that the skinny tall one used a dagger to. Chapter 276. She was so cold and in pain that she could not say a single word. It was Xie Jingxing who walked into the cabin. In these exquisite pleasure boats, there would be some spare furnaces and clothes. He took out a furnace from the wooden box and lit it up with a match before adding some charcoal inside. The furnace burned warmly and the pleasure boat swayed in the lake. Xie Jingxing glanced at Shen Miao and suddenly his lips hooked up. I want to change clothes and you want to keep your eyes open. Shen Miao suddenly closed her eyes. At this moment her state of mind was somewhat chaotic and it was difficult for Xie Jingxing to still have the mood to tease her. One only heard a light chuckle followed by the rustling of clothes and after a moment, Xie Jingxing's voice sounded, "Done." Shen Miao opened her eyes and Xie Jingxing was buttoning the last button. He had changed into a dark green robe and a white fox fur coat which made him look cold and solemn. A pair of black peach blossom eyes stared at Shen Miao with a smile that was not a smile. Do you also want to change? It was very easy to catch a cold when wearing cold and wet clothes. Even if one were to sit by the furnace to bake, it would take a lot of time to completely dry up. One feared that at that time, she would also suffer from the cold. She had always cherished her body. In addition to the fact that her entire body was uncomfortable at the moment, she looked at Xie Jingxing and said calmly, "There are other clothes." Xie Jingxing got up and took out a set of clothes from a cloth bag on the wooden table. He leaned against the wall and said, "My subordinate sent me clothes. The current situation is somewhat troublesome and there is no way to find female clothes for you. If you want to change, you can only change mine." An unmarried female changing into an unfamiliar male's clothes. If this situation were to be set out, it would be somewhat of an erotic color. Shen Miao looked up at Xie Jingxing and the smile on his lips was slightly nasty. One did not know if it was really forced by the situation or it was intentional. Shen Miao found that Xie Jingxing really had a special charm. Ever since her rebirth, she faced everyone with the mentality of Empress Shen. Even when facing Shen Qiu, he couldn't treat Shen Qiu as his big brother. Sometimes, he even felt like he was taking care of Shen Qiu. But every time she met Xie Jingxing, his viciousness would always make Shen Miao absent-minded, as if she was not the Empress Shen who had experienced ups and downs, but a naive fifth young lady of the Shen family who did not know the evils of the world. After taking a deep breath in her heart, Shen Miao said, "Give it to me." Her answer made Xie Jingxing somewhat surprised. He looked at her suspiciously and asked, "You want to wear my clothes? Are there any other clothes here?" Shen Miao asked. Xie Jingxing smiled and threw the clothes in his hands to her. Shen Miao took the clothes and endured it before saying to Xie Jingxing, "May little Marquis turn around." When Xie Jingxing heard it, he sized her up from head to toe meaningfully. Shen Miao's clothes were now wet and stuck to her body. She was petite and the figure of a young female was almost revealed. Her somewhat disheveled appearance revealed a delicate posture that was not usually seen. Xie Jingxing said with interest, "A little girl still smelling of her mother's milk would also be shy. Do not worry." His eyes were picky and disdainful, "There is nothing and there is nothing to look at." Finishing, he turned his head away and did not look at Shen Miao at all. Shen Miao's heart was slightly relieved and picked up Xie Jingxing's clothes. It was a light green cotton robe and the cuffs were ironed. The material and embroidery were of high quality. Shen Miao subconsciously touched it. This kind of workmanship, most likely only the palace would have such enjoyment in her previous lifetime. It was rumored that the Marquis of Lineage's fortune could rival a country and it was not false. She slowly took off her wet outer and inner clothes and used the wet clothes to warm them on the stove to wipe off the water droplets on her body before picking up Xie Jingxing's robe. Who knew that Xie Jingxing's robe style was complicated and she did not wear it properly? Not only that, the belt was also wrapped around her left calf. Her calf originally had a dagger wound and previously one thought that it was not serious, but now it seemed that the badly mutilated appearance was somewhat scary. The belt rubbed against the wound and Shen Miao sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. She did not sit properly and fell to the ground with a bang, and even knocked over the teapot on the table. When Xie Jingxing heard the movement, he immediately turned back and saw Shen Miao falling to the ground and stepped forward to help her up. Shen Miao was not able to stop him in time as her entire body leaned into his embrace. Her clothes were not properly worn and were loosely wrapped around her body. Her shoulders were slightly exposed and her hair was not dry, making her look somewhat charming. No matter how calm she was, there was a moment of panic and helplessness. It was Xie Jingxing who frowned as he held her calf and stared at the wound. What happened? Chapter 277. What happened? Shen Miao was surprised for a moment. From her point of view, such a frivolous action should have been stopped with a stern shout, but she did not know why. She honestly replied, "Just now when I was escaping, I was injured by a dagger." Xie Jingxing swept a glance at her and took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom and threw it to her. "Apply the medicine." Shen Miao took it and did not speak much as she wanted to apply the medicine. But because at the moment she was sitting on the ground and because she had been soaked in the cold lake for a long time, she did not have any strength at all. Not to mention applying the medicine, it was difficult to even sit up. When Xie Jingxing saw this, he could only walk to her side and hold her shoulders to support her to the small couch on the boat. Shen Miao had lived for 2 lifetimes and was not a young lady who had her first awakening of love, so naturally she would not be embarrassed because of the 2 of them being alone. However, she was draped in Xie Jingxing's wide clothes and her snow-white shoulders were exposed. When the cold wind blew, one did not know if it was because of the cold or discomfort, but there was a layer of goosebumps. Before she could say anything, a warm thing covered her head and directly buried her head in it. Shen Miao shook her head and discovered that the thing covering her body was Xie Jingxing's fox fur coat. That fox fur coat was warm and Shen Miao subconsciously wrapped it tighter, only revealing her small palm-sized face. She looked at Xie Jingxing without speaking and really looked like a furry little fox. Xie Jingxing found it somewhat funny and got up to walk to the other side. One did not know what he was holding, but he squatted down in front of Shen Miao and reached out to grab Shen Miao's leg. "What are you doing?" Shen Miao avoided and asked. "If your injury is not treated, it will fester tomorrow." Xie Jingxing said, "Don't think of taking advantage of me." Shen Miao. This person's words were really too hateful. What taking advantage of him? He even used such a serious expression to say it. Shen Miao simply did not want to bother with him. She said, "I will do it myself." "All right." Xie Jingxing did not say anything further and stood up and leaned against the cabinet at the side like he was watching a show. He crossed his arms and said, "I will watch you." "You do it." Shen Miao bent down but her hands almost could not hold the bottle steadily. Previously, when he was arguing with the other 2, he had been thrown by the tall and skinny man several times. His entire body was aching from the impact. At this moment, his hands were trembling. He forcefully opened the bottle, but he almost spilled the contents inside. After struggling for a long time, she finally gave up, but she did not want to admit defeat so easily with Xie Jingxing, so she just sat on the snow-white fox fur and stared at Xie Jingxing without saying a word. Xie Jingxing laughed out and took the medicine bottle from Shen Miao's hands before squatting down again and holding Shen Miao's calf. He casually said, "I am not a good person. If you want to be angry, one fear that you will bet your leg." Shen Miao remained silent. Xie Jingxing held her calf and slowly lifted up the trousers. His hands were cold and slender, and seemed to have the unique calluses of a martial artist. When it was grinding on the delicate skin, Shen Miao had an uncomfortable feeling, as if that piece of skin was also heating up. In the next moment, the cloth that was stuck to the wound because of the blood was suddenly pulled apart, and it was so painful that Shen Miao almost cried out. The wound is somewhat deep. Xie Jingxing looked at it and said with a frown, "Why did you not say it earlier? I did not think that you would be so kind-hearted." Shen Miao said. She indeed did not think that Xie Jingxing would be so kind to apply medicine for her. With their friendship, Xie Jingxing coming over to save her life could be said to have deep feelings. Such a person with deep thoughts was also not a good person, so Shen Miao could not think of any reason why Xie Jingxing would help her. So this leg injury could only be treated after returning to the Shen residence. Chapter 278. Xie Jingxing got up and picked up the teapot from the small table at the side and poured the water inside clean. He then stretched one hand out of the boat and scooped up a pot of lake water and placed it on the stove to boil. He said, "I indeed do not have good intentions, but seeing that you are loyal, one will be a good person for once." Speaking till here, he looked up at Shen Miao and said, "Everyone said that Shen Xian is loyal and righteous, but one did not expect that a girl from the Shen family would also be loyal. Many thanks to you for not selling me out." He was half joking and half serious, so Shen Miao did not explain that he had misunderstood. At that time in that situation, if she had immediately said that the person in the secret room was Xie Jingxing, those two people would have immediately killed her. Who did not know how to stall for time, but Xie Jingxing thought that she did not say it because of loyalty and to make Xie Jingxing feel that he owed her a favor. Why not? Thus Shen Miao did not intend to clarify this misunderstanding. However, Shen Miao lowered her head and pondered. Even if she really sold Xie Jingxing out, with Xie Jingxing's ability, he would still be able to retreat unscathed. Just now she heard clearly that those two people definitely had companions nearby, but now there was no movement at all, so one could imagine who was the one who did it. After a short silence, the water in the teapot boiled. Xie Jingxing casually tore off a piece of cloth from the corner of his robe and dipped it in the hot water. With one hand, he held Shen Miao's calf and placed it on his knee, and the other hand wiped the dirty blood around the wound. Shen Miao's feet were almost in Xie Jingxing's embrace and she could feel his cold clothes. The material was also cold and stiff, as if his frivolous appearance was cold and solemn. Shen Miao was somewhat uncomfortable and turned her head away, and her toes could not help but curl up slightly. In her past life, other than Fu Xiu-yi, she did not have such intimate contact with other males. Even if it was Fu Xiu-yi, now that she recalled it, it was more of a reluctance. Most of the time, Fu Xiu-yi left her with the impression of a sovereign king. Thus there were almost no males that she had seen in her youth. Feeling somewhat silent, Shen Miao looked for a topic and asked, "Who are those people?" Those people that she was talking about was naturally that skinny and tall person. Hearing this, Xie Jingxing did not speak. He only wiped off the dirty blood on Shen Miao's calf and sprinkled some medicinal powder before taking out a handkerchief to bandage it for her. When he was doing this, he lowered his head and looked extremely serious. His technique was also very skilled, as if dressing wounds was something that he was very familiar with. The lights on the boat flickered, the lanterns of the Wanli Lake were like brocade, shining brightly on his face. The youth's features were unbelievably handsome, and it seemed that in this brief moment of brilliance, there was an illusion of gentleness. Even Shen Miao could not help but be slightly startled. However, this illusion of gentleness did not last long. Xie Jingxing put down her feet and suddenly both hands were by Shen Miao's side as he leaned closer. His well-defined face was in close proximity and his peach blossom eyes seemed to be filled with intoxicating wine as he looked over with a smile that was not a smile. It was clearly a casual action, but it was so strong that it made one unable to breathe. Shen Miao calmly looked at him. After staring at Shen Miao for a while, Xie Jingxing then released his hands and lightly said, "It is not good for you to know too much." "I do not want to know anything." Shen Miao said, "I only hope that you do not implicate me." When the words came out, her heart was somewhat vexed. One did not know what was going on today. Perhaps it was because the matter happened suddenly, or perhaps it was because of the injury that made her feel agitated, but when facing Xie Jingxing, it actually stimulated some of the little temper that was buried deep in her bones. Those random venting of anger, willfulness, and bickering were unknowingly drawn out by Xie Jingxing. "As long as you know propriety, no one can implicate you," Xie Jingxing said. He tidied up the messy cloth strips on the boat and found a long pole to hang Shen Miao's wet clothes on to warm them. Chapter 279. When can I leave? Shen Miao asked. There are people watching outside, and if one were to go out now, it would attract criticism. Moreover, if you stay with me, it would be hard to avoid blaming me. Xie Jingxing's words were still able to anger people to death, so for my innocence, when the boat docks, I will bring you to the princess residence. The people from the princess residence will send you back. Shen Miao was slightly startled. Princess residence. Princess Rong Axian. Xie Jingxing fiddled with the charcoal. She will help. Princess Rong Axian was also born from the late emperor's imperial concubine, and even though she was not as favored as Princess Yuqing, she was deeply loved by the late emperor. Among the children of the late emperor, Princess Yuqing and Princess Rong Axian had a deep sisterly relationship. Princess Yuqing married the Marquis of Linan and Princess Rong Axian married the current Zhuangyuan scholar, but unfortunately the Zhuangyuan scholar died of illness a few years later. Princess Rong Axian did not change and moved back to the princess residence and was a widow for so many years. With Princess Yuqing and Princess Rong Axian's friendship, they would help Xie Jingxing in this matter. Shen Miao looked up at Xie Jingxing. He really thought far ahead. If at this moment the Shen family were to come over and see them alone with disheveled clothes, it would be hard to avoid thinking too much. With the relationship between the Shen and Xia family, who knew if it would become more complicated in the future? For Princess Rong Axian to come forward, it was a good idea. The sound of fireworks came from the top of her head. Shen Miao was originally leaning against the window of the boat, and when she heard the sound, she looked out of the window. In the night sky of the Ding capital, there were all sorts of colorful and bright fireworks. Just like what Bai Lu and Shuangjiang said, the fireworks would not stop tonight. Just now, when there was a surge of people, the mood was different from looking at the quiet lake. You like to see these? Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. I do not like. Shen Miao replied. During the annual banquet of the Ming Qi imperial family, the emperor and the concubines would have fun together, and there would be countless fireworks in the imperial garden. At that time she had just returned from the Qin country, and suddenly there was an additional Mei Furen in the palace. On the night of the banquet, Mei Furen and Fu Xiu-yi were drinking and having fun in the imperial garden. She sat in Kunning Palace accompanied by Wan Yu and Fu Ming as she watched the fireworks by herself. That was the coldest fireworks that she had ever seen, and since then, she did not like these things. It's just a fleeting thing. What's there to see? Nice to look at but useless. There was a hint of anger in her voice, but her eyes seemed a little sad. Xie Jingxing looked at her strangely, and after thinking for a while, he got up and took something from the cabinet. He walked to Shen Miao's side and handed the thing in his hand to Shen Miao. One do not know how long it would take for the boat to reach the shore. Since today is the Jade Rabbit Festival, you should also make a flower lantern. Xie Jingxing said. Shen Miao looked at the lantern in her hands. Most likely it was left behind by the people who were playing on the boat, as the candles had not been put in and was neatly folded. Looking out of the window, the surface of the Wanli Lake was surrounded by layers upon layers of lanterns. Their boat shuttled back and forth in a sea of resplendent lights, like a ferry in the beautiful Milky Way. Not waiting for Shen Miao to answer, Xie Jingxing made one himself. After he finished making the lantern, he casually placed it into the lake. His actions were also very casual. When Shen Miao saw it, she asked, "Why did you not write a note?" One had to put a note in the lantern, and on the note was the wish of the person who made the lantern, so that the deities would be able to hear the prayers of the person and would bless the person who made the lantern in the coming year. "I do not believe in deities," Xie Jingxing said lazily. "It is fine not to write." Shen Miao thought about it and was really unable to imagine what kind of scene it would be like with Xie Jingxing's arrogant and unruly temperament to seriously pray for the deities' blessings. She folded the two lanterns but did not write a note and did not put any candles inside. Instead, she lit the flower at the top of the lantern and placed it into the lake. Chapter 280. The two lanterns were burning from top to bottom and looked like two balls of fire on the lake. Xie Jingxing was startled for a moment before asking, "These are the lanterns for worship. What are you doing?" Lighting the lanterns was a lantern for the dead. It was so lively without rhyme or reason, but Shen Miao was actually here to worship the dead. Shen Miao did not care about Xie Jingxing's words and only watched as the lanterns gradually burned until the flames engulfed the lanterns. After a long time, there were no longer any shadows of the two lanterns on the lake. After being reborn, there were some things that could be repeated but some things could not be repeated. For example, Wan Yu and Fu Ming. In the previous lifetime and this lifetime, the meeting was an eternal farewell. In this lifetime, there was no longer that gentle and generous princess or the sensible and steady crown prince. A handkerchief was handed to Shen Miao. She raised her head and Xie Jingxing said impatiently, "Why are you crying again?" Shen Miao touched her cheeks and unknowingly, her cheeks were actually wet. Most likely it was Lu Jingxing's sorrow that she was not even conscious of her tears. Seeing her take the handkerchief, Xie Jingxing said, "You have some loyalty. If there are any difficulties in the future, you can come and find me." The words that came out of nowhere made Shen Miao stun for a moment before looking at Xie Jingxing. The youth's side profile under the bright lights of the lake was even more beautiful. He leaned against the window and looked at Shen Miao with a flash of complicated light in his eyes. But he casually said, "I do not like to owe people favors. Since you did not betray me today, I will not treat you unfairly. Seeing that you have gotten into a lot of trouble, perhaps in the future there will be a need for me. At that time, on account of today's account, I will lend a helping hand." Shen Miao said, "Then many thanks to little Marquis." Xie Jingxing smiled and suddenly turned his head to look at her. There was some teasing in his tone, but help is help, but you must not fall in love with me. Shen Miao was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She said, "Little Marquis is thinking too much." "Is it?" Xie Jingxing walked over from the window and looked down at Shen Miao, who was sitting on the couch. He suddenly pulled out the hairpin from Shen Miao's head and thoughtfully looked at it in his hands. "Then why are you wearing the hairpin that I gave you?" He deliberately emphasized the word I. Shen Miao was at a loss for words. Just as she wanted to say that it was the maid who put it on for her, she heard Xie Jingxing continue, "Today you have touched and seen me, but forget about pledging one's body." He smiled maliciously, "A little girl that has not grown up yet. I am not that hungry that I cannot be choosy." This person's words were too vicious. You even like to distort the truth. In Shen Miao's past and present lifetime, those that she met were either hypocrites or those that had a look of awe-inspiring righteousness. It was the first time that she met a scoundrel that could anger others to death with just one sentence. "I don't like little Marquis and I won't like him in the future. Little Marquis can rest assured." Shen Miao said sarcastically. That's good. Xie Jingxing stared at her. The smile on his lips was still playful, but in his pitch-black eyes, there was a kind of warning and indifference. He said, "Little girl, I am not a good person." Shen Miao did not speak. Xie Jingxing was not a good person, but could she be considered a good person? Perhaps in the past lifetime, but in this lifetime, she was sinister and ruthless, and was completely not related to the word good. The boat quietly drifted down with the current, and outside the window, it started to snow lightly. Half of the lake was sparkling with snowflakes and the other half was bright lights. The fireworks in the sky were colorful. This New Year's Jade Rabbit Festival did not seem to be very good, but after all it was special. The purple-clad youth leaned against the window and looked out indifferently. One did not know how long he looked, and when he turned his head, he discovered that Shen Miao had fallen asleep on the small table. Chapter 281. When she was asleep, there was no alienation or dignified expression on her face. Because of today's torment, her cheeks were still red, and with Xie Jingxing's slightly large fox fur coat, she really looked like a young lady that had not grown up yet. Her hair was already slightly dried by the stove, and a lock of long hair covered her eyes. Most likely it was a little itchy, as Shen Miao frowned in her dreams. Xie Jingxing walked to her side and paused for a moment before reaching out to tuck the lock of hair that was covering her eyes to the back of her ears. He then took out the jade begonia hairpin that he just plucked from Shen Miao's head and gently inserted it into Shen Miao's head. He crossed his arms and looked at Shen Miao for a while. Seeing that she was sleeping soundly, he raised his brows. To be able to sleep so well in front of a strange male, one really do not know fear. After sitting for a while, the boat came to a sudden stop. It had finally reached the shore. Xie Jingxing walked to the bow of the boat, and a few black-clad figures appeared from the shore. The leader said, replying to Master, "Everything has been dealt with cleanly. Is Master returning to the residence now?" Xie Jingxing looked back at the cabin and said, "Head to the princess residence first. Tai Yi, bring a horse carriage over." He turned back to the cabin and knocked on the small table. Shen Miao sleepily raised her head, and Xie Jingxing said, "Reached the shore." "Already reached?" Shen Miao suddenly woke up and looked out of the window before walking out. However, the injury on her leg had not healed, and when she stood up, her legs softened and she almost fell down. Xie Jingxing grabbed her arm, and after thinking about it, he stretched out his hand and wrapped the fox fur around Shen Miao's body tighter. He carried her along with the fox fur and walked out of the boat. Shen Miao jumped in shock and subconsciously reached out to hug Xie Jingxing's neck. Looking up, Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up. "Be more honest. Do not take advantage of me." Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing's hand wrapped around her shoulders. He was tall and had long legs, so it was effortless for him to carry Shen Miao. Shen Miao's head was in his embrace, and she could feel his tall and sturdy chest and his powerful heartbeat, making her feel somewhat uncomfortable. When they left the boat, they discovered that there was already a group of black-clad people standing outside. When they saw Xie Jingxing carrying a little girl out, even though they tried their best to endure, their expressions were somewhat strange. The most relaxed one was Xie Jingxing. He walked to the front of the horse carriage and threw Shen Miao inside before saying, "To the princess residence." He left without even turning his head back. The carriage wobbled away, leaving the group of black-clothed men looking at each other in dismay. A tall young man said, "Tai Yi, why did Master carry a girl out? What is the relationship between that girl and Master?" That's right, that's right." Another woman also walked over, rubbing her chin as she muttered, "After so many years, how many beauties have been unable to get close to Master's body? So Master has this kind of taste." Her eyes lit up. "Ha, no wonder." Shoo shoo shoo, who said that? Another charming mature woman said with dissatisfaction, what's there to look at that silly little girl? Has her hair grown out yet? Huolong, I know you like master, but this, you can't be jealous. The woman from before smiled and looked at the middle-aged man in the middle. Tai Yi, you are the closest to master. Who is that little girl? What's the matter with master? Tell us about it. All shut up. Tai Yi, who was standing in the middle, could not bear it anymore. All go back, go back. The people in the secret department are all so idle. Tomorrow go and guard the tower prison. When those words were spoken, everyone immediately retreated and said, suddenly remembered that there are still some matters. Just now those corpses have been cleared. It is better to return to the secret department to report the situation. Today was really dangerous. As they chatted, they walked away. Tai Yi let out a sigh of relief before turning back and disappearing into the night. Chapter 282. Speaking of the other end, in the princess residence. When the people outside reported Xie Jingxing's arrival, Princess Rong Axian was already preparing to sleep. She had been a widow for many years and had no children by her side, thus every New Year's festival, she would appear to be alone. Even if Emperor Wenhui in the palace had the title of siblings with her, but after all they did not crawl out from the same mother's womb, so how could they be that close? Moreover, it was better to stay in the princess residence than to interact with the emperor in the palace, so for so many years of Jade Rabbit Festival, Princess Rong Axian would not enter the palace nor go out to play, but quietly stay in the residence, just like usual. Today was different. When she knew that Xie Jingxing had come, Princess Rong Axian was somewhat surprised. After changing her clothes, she then went out to welcome him. When she walked into the hall, she saw that Xie Jingxing was already sitting on a chair waiting. When he saw her, he smiled gently. Rong Yi. Princess Rong Axian's maiden name was Yu Rong and she had a deep sisterly relationship with Princess Yu Qing, thus it was not wrong for Xie Jingxing to call her Rong Yi. Why did you come over today? When Princess Rong Axian saw Xie Jingxing, she was somewhat puzzled, but there was more joy. She did not have any children and had long treated Xie Jingxing as her own son. She pitied Xie Jingxing's life experience. When Princess Yu Qing passed away, when Princess Rong Axian came to the residence of the Marquis of Lineage to offer her condolences, she even scolded Xie Ding badly. Even though Xie Jingxing was mischievous, he treated Princess Rong Axian with great respect and would come over to the princess residence to pay his respects during every New Year's festival. It was just that normally he would come over on the first day of the new year, but this year he came on the Jade Rabbit Festival, which made Princess Rong Axian somewhat surprised. Miss Rong Yi, so come over to take a look. Will Rong Yi not welcome me? Xie Jingxing smiled. His appearance was outstanding to begin with, and now that he was speaking in a half-joking, half-serious manner, his handsome and romantic appearance caused all the maidservants in the hall to blush. Princess Rong Axian tapped his forehead and smiled. You even dare to tease an old person like me. You little brat, your guts are getting fatter. It is one thing to miss Rong Yi, but there is another matter to seek Rong Yi's help in coming over tonight. Princess Rong Axian was surprised for a moment before she sat up straight and said seriously, Jingxing, did you encounter any difficulties? If there is anything difficult, just tell Rong Yi. And Rong, don't be nervous. It's just a small matter. Xie Jingxing explained with a smile, I have a friend who got separated from her family during the Jade Rabbit Festival and unfortunately fell into the water. Even though I saved her, it was somewhat inconvenient. She even wanted Aunt Rong to send her back in the name of the princess residence. He said it was simple, but when Princess Rong Axian heard it, she understood the matter. Even though Ming Qi was more open to the matters between men and women, but after all a female's reputation was very sensitive and if some rumors were to spread, it would be unbearable. But Princess Rong Axian looked at Xie Jingxing. That friend of yours is actually a young lady? Xie Jingxing nodded. It's been so many years, but I've never seen a girl by your side. Princess Rong Axian suddenly mischievously said, Jingxing, you are also an adult. One do not know how old is that young lady, and is there any marriage arrangement in the family? Aunt Rong. Xie Jingxing helplessly said, she is still a young lady. He had no choice but to help her because he owed her a favor. Don't tell me you don't want to help me. What are you talking about? Princess Rong Axian pretended to be angry. Which time did Aunt Rong not help you? Alright. Where is that young lady now? In the horse carriage outside. Aunt Rong will help her find a set of clothes to change into. Xie Jingxing said. Hearing that, Princess Rong Axian's gaze towards Xie Jingxing became more meaningful. When Xie Jingxing saw it, he only shook his head and found it funny and was too lazy to explain. Princess Rong Axian instructed the maids by her side to bring Shen Miao, who was in the horse carriage, to the resident's bedroom to rest and said to Xie Jingxing, but you have not told me which family's young lady is she from. Shen family of the capital, formidable great general's daughter, Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing lazily said. Princess Rong Axian was drinking tea and almost choked on the tea when she heard that. She looked at Xie Jingxing and said in disbelief, that idiot noble girl. Isn't she in love with Prince Ding? Xie Jingxing shrugged his shoulders. Princess Rong Axian carefully looked at him and deliberated over her words. Jingxing, there are thousands of young ladies in the world and you are still young. Wait a while more. Xie Jingxing, 2 flowers bloomed, each representing one branch. On one side, Princess Rong Axian and Xie Jingxing were having a heart-to-heart talk while on the other side, Shen Miao was sitting in Princess Rong Axian's bedroom, watching the maids coming and going to tidy up her clothes and hair. In the previous lifetime, Princess Rong Axian did not treat her with such enthusiasm. Perhaps she looked down on her self-seeking behavior or felt that her learning was crude, thus she always treated her coldly. Even after she became the Empress, Princess Rong Axian was lukewarm towards her. And because Princess Rong Axian was not in the palace all year round and would occasionally enter the palace, her gaze towards her was not very friendly. In Shen Miao's heart, Princess Rong Axian was not a person that was easy to get along with. Who knew that with such hospitality, it made Shen Miao somewhat inexplicable. Chapter 283. Shen Miao sat in Princess Rong Axian's residence for a moment and changed her clothes before having her hair combed by the maid. After drinking a cup of tea, Princess Rong Axian then walked in. Shen young lady is still all right. Princess Rong Axian smiled, already instructed the kitchen to bring the ginger tea. In such a cold day, warm the body and do not catch a cold. Shen Miao replied with a smile, many thanks to your Princess Highness. But there was some suspicion in her heart. Princess Rong Axian had never been this kind to her before. At this moment it was still that face, but there was not a trace of the previous life's harshness and coldness, making Shen Miao suspect if the person in front was really Princess Rong Axian. When she was thinking, Princess Rong Axian was also sizing her up with a thoughtful gaze. Even though Princess Rong Axian did not like to go out, but the rumors in the Ding capital would eventually fall into her ears. Because she did not move out often, the news stopped a long time ago, which was the fact that the D5th young lady of the Ding capital was an idiot. In Princess Rong Axian's impression, Shen Miao was a timid and weak female who was extremely brazen in pursuing males. She had no talent and virtue and was born vulgar, so how could she match up to Xie Jingxing who had superior looks and learning? However, at this moment, the young female's appearance was delicate and her eyes were as clear as water. Even though she was sitting, there was a rare air of nobility and majesty that one could not help but change her view a little. Tonight the Wanli Lake is crowded and Shin young lady was separated from her family. Presumably she must be frightened. Princess Rong Axane smiled. After drinking the ginger tea, Ben Gong will let the servant send you back. Her face had some probing on it. Today you met with an accident. Ben Gong's nephew had unprecedentedly asked me to help. The nephew naturally referred to Xie Jingxing. Shen Miao looked at Princess Rong Xane's meaningful expression and did not know how to continue the words. She paused before saying, little Xie Marquis is chivalrous and courageous. Today I have troubled you. Finishing, she felt sour at her own words. Xie Jingxing was chivalrous and courageous. Clearly he had a black heart. Today, she was implicated by Xie Jingxing, but now it seemed like she owed Xie Jingxing a favor. When Princess Rong Axane saw Shen Miao's somewhat distant words, it seemed that she was deliberately drawing a line between her and Xie Jingxing. She felt even more satisfied. If Shen Miao was a person that climbed all over one's face, she would take advantage of Xie Jingxing's little time and could not wait to show that her relationship with Xie Jingxing was not ordinary, and pester Xie Jingxing no matter what. Princess Rong Axane would look down on Shen Miao without saying a word. Although he was happy to see the feelings between a young man and a young woman, he was, after all, from the strict etiquette of the royal family. He really didn't care about private matters. What are you talking about? Princess Rong Axane smiled cordially. Jingxing the child also said that you are his friend and there is no need to be so formal between friends. Speaking of which, Jingxing is Ben Gong's nephew and since you have a friendship with him, it is possible to treat Ben Gong as your Imu. Shen Miao held the teacup and almost choked on the tea in her throat. To see Princess Rong Axane as one's own Yumu. It was when she married Fu Xiu-yi in the last lifetime and Princess Rong Axane really became her own Yumu. Afterwards when she wanted to curry favor with Princess Rong Axane privately, Princess Rong Axane coldly said, never mind. Ben Gong do not have a niece like you. That Princess Rong Axane who coldly rejected her closeness, now said to her cordially, it is possible to treat me as one's own Yumu. Shen Miao felt that she was most likely dreaming. Seeing that she was somewhat stunned, Princess Rong Axane felt that this child was honest and did not have the schemes of those noble young ladies. She pulled her hand and said, Ben Gong do not have any children, in the future you may come over to Ben Gong's place to sit. She took off the bracelet on her wrist and put it on Shen Miao's hand. Treat this as a meeting gift from Ben Gong to you. Chapter 284. This is too valuable. Shen Miao declined. This bracelet was a sand-sprayed peony jade double ring and there were a total of 5 gold rings interlocking with each other. It was the dowry of the deceased great imperial consort, which was also Princess Rong Axane's birth mother's dowry. Afterwards when Princess Rong Axane married, it was given to her. In Shen Miao's past life, she had seen Princess Rong Axane wearing this double ring, and it was enough to see how precious it was. You can just wear it. Princess Rong Axane smiled, it is just a small toy. One think that your Shen family have gold, silver and jewelry, so one must not dislike it. How would this official's daughter dare to dislike the great imperial consort's bracelet? Shen Miao said, but it is still too valuable. Princess Rong Axane was surprised for a moment. How do you know that this is the great imperial consort's bracelet? Shen Miao also paused and secretly cried out in her heart. Because she was the head of the 6 palaces in her past life, naturally she knew all about the matters of the womenfolk in the palace. But in this life, she was a daughter of an official's family and naturally would not know about the imperial family's private matters. Seeing Princess Rong Axane's suspicious gaze, Shen Miao suddenly had an idea and smiled. One heard little Xie Marquis mention that little Xie Marquis and your Princess Highness have a good relationship and often mention about your Princess Highness. So it was like this. Princess Rong Xian's expression suddenly softened and said with relief, Ben Gong had treated him as one's own child all these years. It is difficult for him to have a conscience. Speaking till here, the gaze that looked at Shen Miao was different, but he actually told you about this matter. Shen Miao's body stiffened and indeed heard Princess Rong Xian say, it seems that he really treat you as a friend. Princess Rong Xian sighed, Jing Xing, this child, even though he looks a little mischievous, he is a good one. For so many years, Ben Gong had not seen him being so attentive to any young lady. She smiled at Shen Miao, you are the first. Shen Miao secretly said in her heart that Princess Rong Xian's appearance was really like Xie Jingxing's birth mother. But Xie Jingxing did not fancy her because of any romance. One feared that Xie Jingxing was suspicious of her. To deal with such an intelligent person, one would have a headache at every step. Just at this time, the maid sent boiled ginger tea over. Princess Rong Xian was chatting with Shen Miao as she watched Shen Miao drink ginger tea. The more she chatted with Shen Miao, the more Princess Rong Xian liked Shen Miao. She found that Shen Miao was not the idiotic idiot that was rumored to be. Instead, she was very knowledgeable and had a great magnanimity. Even though it was just a simple chat, she did not feel that it was by the book. One did not know how a daughter who was raised in the boudoir would have such broad horizons. Thinking of the matter of Shen Miao being in love with Prince Ding, Princess Rong Xian actually had a trace of worry in her heart. Even though Prince Ding was her nephew, but compared to Fu Xiu-yi, Princess Rong Xian's heart was naturally more biased towards Xie Jingxing's side. Princess Rong Xian also did not wish for her nephew to miss such an outstanding young lady, thus she kept on praising Xie Jingxing as they chatted. Princess Rong Xian's temperament was cold and inflexible. Not to mention outsiders, even if it was her relatives, she would have an ice-cold appearance when facing Emperor Wenhui. But today she was chatting happily with an unfamiliar young female, which almost shocked the jaws of the servants in the princess residence. One did not know that Shen Miao was married to Fu Xiu-yi in the past lifetime and was looking forward to pleasing all the relatives around Fu Xiu-yi. She had inquired a lot about Princess Rong Xian and naturally knew how to cater to her liking. It was just that in the past lifetime there was little effect, but now because of the additional layer of relationship with Xie Jingxing, it was just to Princess Rong Xian's liking. If one knew that Princess Rong Xian was so easy to please, in the past lifetime one only needed to build a good relationship with Xie Jingxing. There was no need to be so powerful. Princess Rong Xian spoke until the time it took for an incense stick to burn before she stood up and said, "The time is not early anymore. If one do not send you back to the residence, one think that General Shen and Shen Furen would be very anxious. Ben Gong had already prepared the horse carriage and will send you back." Finishing, she got up to instruct the servants. Chapter 285. After Shen Miao followed Princess Rong Xian out, she was shocked by the array. Princess Rong Xian's horse carriage was incomparably gorgeous, and what was even more shocking was that there were a group of armed guards. Princess Rong Xian smiled, "There are many people on the streets today. With more people guarding, it would prevent any accidents from happening." The other party had good intentions and Shen Miao had no reason to refuse. Moreover, borrowing the power of Princess Rong Xian's array, it was just nice to punish some of the people in the Shen residence. She then followed the advice and thanked Princess Rong Xian before walking up the carriage. On the streets of the Ding capital, until now, the crowds of people had not decreased. The fireworks were really going to be displayed for the entire night, and on the streets where people were coming and going, a group of ostentatious people and horse carriages would inevitably attract attention. On the city wall at the corner of the street, there was a youth wearing a fox fur coat, and beside him was a middle-aged man. The man said, "Her Princess Highness actually sent so many guards to escort Shen young lady back to the residence." Aunt Rong is not a person that is easy to please. The youth said with interest, this young lady of the Shen family has great abilities. The middle-aged man was silent and suddenly heard the youth beside him said, how are the people that were caught alive today? Replying to master, they are all locked up in the tower prison. 3 of them were death warriors and had already committed suicide by biting poison. The remaining 3 had their jaws removed and refused to speak even if they die. Then pick one and crush his bones. Do not let go of even an inch of his body. I do not need to teach how to kill a chicken to warn the monkeys. Yes. The man hesitated for a moment. Those that sneaked into the city, find them and kill without mercy. The bustling flow of people in the Ding capital and the restlessness and danger under the bustle could not be seen at all in the general residence. In the main hall of the Shen residence, everyone was standing solemnly. Shen Xian and wife who were standing in the middle could not hide their anxiety and worry, and Shen Qiu's face was filled with annoyance. After searching for an entire night, they were not able to find Shen Miao's whereabouts. Shen Xian and his wife were not fools and knew that in this situation, most likely she was not kidnapped by kidnappers. Who would not care that the Shen family's guards were just a few steps away to forcefully kidnap Shen Miao? Normal kidnappers would not take such a big risk, and they were afraid that someone was seeking revenge. Shen Xian and wife did not know about the matter of Prince Yu residence, but Shen Qiu was well aware that the extermination of Prince Yu residence most likely had something to do with Shen Miao. If it was the remnants of Prince Yu residence who had the heart to take revenge for their master, one could imagine the result of Shen Miao falling into their hands. Shen Xian even mobilized the Shen family's army and secretly informed the city's garrison to guard the city gates. They could not be found even after going from house to house in the Ding capital. As time passed, Shen Xian and the few of them almost went crazy. Chen Roqiu opened her mouth gently, eldest brother and eldest Saw, this matter is not a solution. Why not? It is better to report to the authorities. If it is reported to the authorities, it would be better if the capital administrator came forward. It is not a solution for us to search like this. Correct. Shenwan also opened his mouth, eldest brother, the longer this drags on, the more disadvantageous it would be for little Five. The Shen family's army has been searching outside and others would be suspicious if they saw it. Shen Yu stood behind Chen Roqiu and lowered her head so that others could not see her curled-up lips. Serves her right. The matter of Shen Miao going missing was probably the happiest thing that she heard today. She did not think of anything else and only hoped that Shen Miao would be like Shen Qing and be sent back with her innocence tainted. Then from then on, she would be the only daughter of the Shen family. At that time, so what if Shen Xian and wife had the military power and Shen Qiu, her older brother, would protect her? Shen Miao's reputation would be ruined and she would not be able to lift her head up for the rest of her life. No. Luo Shuiyan's eyebrows were vertical and she glared at Chen Roqiu. If it is reported to the authorities, Jiao Jiao's reputation would be completely ruined. Today Shen Miao went missing and she wanted to hide it from others, but the few households of the Shen family were all shrewd and the paper could not wrap the fire. The matter of Shen Miao going missing was finally revealed. Chapter 286. Shen Xian and Shen Qiu searched for the entire night but to no avail and could only order their subordinates to continue searching while they returned to the residence to make plans. Eldest saw. Chen Roqiu had a sincere face. Is Jiao Jiao's reputation more important or her life? If females lose their lives for the sake of reputation, one think that eldest saw would regret it in the future. Chen Roqiu, who are you cursing? When Luo Shuiyan heard it, she immediately shouted angrily. She was an impatient person and it was nothing much to say about herself, but she could not tolerate others saying bad things about Shen Miao and immediately fall out with Chen Roqiu. What are you quarreling about? Old Shinfuren, who had been silent all the while, opened her mouth and glared at Luo Shuiyan. You yourself lost fifth lady, and why are you getting angry at others? Did number two's family say something wrong? After a long time, fifth lady's life would be gone, so what is the use of reputation? On the surface these words sounded like they were thinking for Shin Miao, but Luo Shuiyan felt uncomfortable and subconsciously wanted to refute. That's right, eldest Shin. Shin Yuan also opened his mouth. Even if one does not report to the authorities, with the Shin family's guards outside searching in such a large array, one fear that someone would guess the truth tomorrow. At that time, what is the difference if one reports to the authorities or not? Shin Yuan had already seen Shin Miao as a thorn in his eyes and could not wait to get rid of her. Now that he had not even made a move and Shin Miao had already suffered a calamity, how could it be justified if one did not add oil to the fire? Shin Gui was even happier, but he was not one who would take the lead and only had a regretful expression on his face. Little Five is such a good child. How could she encounter such a thing? Eldest brother, do you have any enemies? The person Shin Gui hated the most was Shin Axayan. Shin Axayan's meritorious services were outstanding and he was always pressured by the court. If Shin Miao met with an accident because of Shin Axayan, one feared that Shin Axayan would feel guilty for a lifetime. Shin Gui then stabbed a knife into Shin Axayan's heart. Wan Yinyang pulled Shin Dongling and stood behind Shin Gui. She was a Yinyang and had no right to speak here. He listened to the others talk without making a sound, but he was secretly glad that he had held Shin Dongling tight, and did not let Shin Dongling be abducted. Shin Dongling's head was lowered and one could not see her expression clearly. That's enough, eldest sister's family. Others will find out anyway. If we report it to the authorities now, we might be able to make fifth sister suffer less. Report to the authorities earlier. Old Shinfuren said, but a glint flashed in her eyes. What she hated the most was that the son of the old general's first wife would always suppress her son in everything. At least Shin Miao did not live up to expectations and made her feel much better. Who knew when it started, Shin Miao had surpassed Shin Qing and Shin Yu, and in addition to Shin Qiu loitering around the residence every day, it made her heart feel suffocated. This time it was rare to see Shin Miao in misfortune, thus old Shinfuren was almost secretly delighted. She could not wait to report to the authorities so that all the people of Mingqi would know that Shin Miao was abducted by kidnappers. It would be best if she lost her innocence and the first household of the Shin family would not be able to lift their heads up. This would be delightful. Shin Axayan and Luo Shuiyan had yet to speak, but Shin Qiu clenched his fists tightly. He was young and full of vigor, but it did not mean that he did not know how to read people's expressions. On the surface these people were saying that they were thinking for Shin Miao's sake, but their eyes were flashing with schadenfreude and hitting others when they were down. No wonder Shin Miao changed so much in 1 year. Her schemes were deep and she was so mature that she was not like a child. It was all because she was forced out by the Shin family. There was never a moment like now where he clearly realized what kind of environment Shin Miao was living in. Luo Shuiyan and Shin Axayan looked at each other and their gazes were fierce. If one were to say that there was still some misunderstanding regarding the fire in the ancestral hall, after all they did not see the cause of the matter, but the scene in front of them was clearly presented in front of them. Luo Shuiyan was angry, but Shin Axayan was extremely shocked and disappointed. He treated them with sincerity, respect, and helped them, but when his daughter met with an accident, he saw that he was secretly delighted. Shin Axayan suddenly felt that those happy and harmonious and friendly scenes were so ironic. Chapter 287. Shin Yu worriedly said, "What would those people do to fifth younger sister?" Fifth younger sister is very good-looking, and one heard that good-looking young ladies would be sold especially far away by kidnappers. If they were not kidnappers, one feared that they would not let fifth younger sister have a good time after so much trouble. As she spoke, 2 drops of tears flowed down as if she was extremely sad. Shen Dongling, who was standing quietly at the side, had a touch of ridicule in her eyes, but she was still in a daze and did not speak. "Eldest brother, are we going to report to the authorities or not?" Shen Wan asked. The atmosphere was in a deadlock when suddenly one heard the panting voice of a servant. "Furen, master, 5th young lady has returned." That servant ran into the main hall and did not even take a breath before saying, "5th young lady was sent back by the people from the princess residence." Everyone was first shocked by the servant's words of Shen Miao's return to the residence. Shen Axian and wife were pleasantly surprised, and when they heard the 3 words princess residence, they did not recover to their senses for a moment. It was Shen Wan's heart that moved and stepped forward to ask, "Which princess residence?" That servant caught his breath and said with some excitement, "It is Her Highness Princess Rong Axian." She had sent a lot of people to escort 5th young lady back to the residence, and the guards are standing at the entrance of the residence. Princess Rong Axian. Chen Rochio's footsteps paused and she bit her lips. Princess Rong Axian did not ask about court matters, and it was nothing to males, but it was different to females, especially to the circle of noble ladies in the capital. Now all the females in the palace had to give face to Princess Rong Axian, but Princess Rong Axian herself was hard to get close to. She was serious and old-fashioned, and many noble Furens who wanted to please her suffered a loss. But this legendary, most old-fashioned and serious princess actually personally sent Shen Miao back. Looking at this situation, it was actually not low. Chen Rochio's heart was so jealous that she was about to go crazy. Shen Axian and Luo Shuaiyan did not say anything further as they ran out of the residence, and when the rest of the people saw the situation, they also followed. One saw a dense crowd of people at the entrance of the general's residence, and when one walked closer, one could see clearly that they were all armored guards, and the number of people was really frightening. And there was a crowd of commoners surrounding the entrance to watch the bustle. Most likely they did not know what tricks the Shen residence was playing. Shen Axian and Luo Shuaiyan were surprised for a moment, as it was out of their expectations to see so many guards. They then saw a female official walking to the side of the carriage and help Shen Miao down. Luo Shuaiyan quickly went up and said worriedly, "Jiao Jiao." She looked at Shen Miao from top to bottom and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Shen Miao's expression was normal. That female official smiled and said, "Today Her Princess Highness was playing at the Wanli Lake and coincidentally met the lost 5th Shen young lady. The princess carriage accidentally knocked down 5th Shen young lady and thus brought 5th Shen young lady back to the princess residence to rest." One did not think that General Shen and Shen Furen would be anxious, and the princess let this servant apologize. These words frankly explained why Shen Miao would walk together with Princess Rong Axian. Even though there were still some peculiarities, but since Princess Rong Axian had spoken, who would dare to question it? Today, with so many guards and attracted so many onlookers, one feared that no one would believe even if someone wanted to spread some unfavorable rumors. This was a genuine confirmation of Shen Miao's innocence. At the back of the crowd, old Shen Furen was so angry that her face turned green. It was not easy to wait for Shen Miao to be unlucky, but Princess Rong Axian appeared midway. Old Shen Furen even hated Princess Rong Axian, who was a busybody. "Your Princess Highness is too polite. It should be this Shen thanking your Princess Highness for saving my daughter." Shen Axian replied. That servant quickly moved sideways to avoid it and smiled, "One dare not accept General Shen's courtesy. Since the person has been sent, this servant will leave first." Finishing, she urged the guards to move, and when she was about to leave, she suddenly thought of something and walked to Shen Miao's side. "The princess is very fond of 5th Shen young lady. Today the reception was rushed, and before leaving, she said that if 5th Shen young lady is free in the future, please visit the princess residence. Her Princess Highness will definitely entertain you well." Finishing, she then left with the guards in the carriage. Chapter 288. Princess Rong Axian was very fond of Shen Miao, and even let Shen Miao visit the princess residence when she is free. The Shen family stood at the residence's doors and were stunned by the last sentence that the female official said. Shen Yu almost crushed the handkerchief in her hands. She naturally knew about Princess Rong Axian and also knew how difficult it was to get close to this princess. Now one did not know what sorcery Shen Miao used that even Princess Rong Axian had a whole new level of respect for her and was able to climb up a relationship with the imperial family. Then in the future would she be able to build a relationship with His Highness Prince Ding? Shen Yu was really anxious this time. Shen Dongling's eyes moved and heard Wan Yinyang's envious voice, "Fifth young lady is really lucky. This is a princess." Shen Yuan snorted coldly and did not look at the residence's doors again before turning and leaving with a brush of his sleeves. Shen Miao gently smiled at the Shen family. "Today I have made everyone worried." She said it in such an understated manner and immediately made Shen Axian and wife recall the faces of the Shen family's people just now, and their faces became somewhat ugly. Seeing that Shen Miao was fine, everyone in the Shen family was disappointed, and when they looked at Shen Miao again, they were so angry that they could not breathe. After old Shen Furen reprimanded Shen Miao with a few words, they all found an excuse to leave. Shen Miao followed Shen Qiu and the rest to the western courtyard, and when she saw Shen Qiu and the rest's ugly expressions, she understood in her heart. Previously she deliberately dragged the princess residence's people to not inform the Shen family of her whereabouts in advance. True feelings were seen in adversity, and similarly, false feelings could be seen in adversity. It was impossible for Shen Axian to change his temperament towards the Shen family overnight, just like how in her previous lifetime, she still had hopes for Fu Xiu-yi until the very last moment. One's feelings towards the Shen family could not be recovered in one night, thus it would take some time for Shen Axian to completely change his view towards the Shen family. Just nice to take this opportunity to let Shen Axian see clearly what kind of a group of jackals and wolves the Shen family were. When they were still in the residence, facing Shen Miao who was in distress, the Shen family were able to hit her when she was down, and when Shen Axian was not in the Ding capital, Shen Axian was not a fool and naturally could guess what had happened to Shen Miao. Sure enough, when they reached the western courtyard, Shen Axian and Luo Shuaiyan carefully inquired about tonight's matters, and after confirming that she was all right, they then instructed Shen Miao to rest early, and both of them left. Before they left, they called Shen Qiu along, obviously wanting to discuss something. After the three of them left, Shen Miao took the opportunity when there was no one around to roll up her trousers. On her calf, the wound was bandaged with a white silk cloth, and it seemed to still have the warmth of someone's palm. It was a night full of surprises, but it seemed that he understood Xie Jingxing more, but the more he understood his opponent, the more dangerous he felt. In the future, it would be best if we don't come into contact with each other. In the eastern courtyard of the Shen residence, Shen Yuan was sitting in the room with a gloomy expression. After Ren Wanyun went crazy, he rarely went to visit, and there was a faintly discernible estrangement between him and Shen Gui. He was not a person who valued friendship and would even kill his own younger sister, so naturally everything was based on benefits. One thought that Shen Miao would not be able to escape this calamity tonight, but who knew that not only did she return unscathed, she even got involved in the princess residence. This made Shen Yuan feel a trace of danger. The strength of the opponent was not enough to be feared, but what made one fearful was that this opponent was still getting stronger. From an idiot young lady who was bullied by others to someone that no one dared to belittle. Her thoughts were deep and her methods were ruthless. Princess Rong Axian, that old-fashioned person, was also subdued by Shen Miao at the end. This made one could not help but think that if Shen Miao had the heart in the future, would she be able to find even more powerful people to back her up? After roping in more people, would the next person to deal with would be him? It was shameful for a proud and arrogant person like Shen Yuan to treat a young female as an opponent. However, he had to admit that it was this young female who had just reached marriageable age that made his second household become like this. Shen Yuan would never leave any future troubles for himself. Shen Miao had harmed the second household to this extent, and it was obvious that she would not be kind, and one day the spearhead would be aimed at him. It was just that Shen Miao was not difficult to deal with, but the difficult thing was that there was still Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan behind her. After all, some considerations were needed, but Shen Yuan looked at the letter in his hands and suddenly smiled. Even though the first household of the Shen family had strong military power, but if there was no successor, then it would only be a pile of mud. One did not know if Shen Xian and wife would be like Ren Wanyun and go crazy from the pain after losing Shen Miao and Shen Qiu, this pair of siblings. Chapter 289. In the 69th year of Ming Qi's Winter New Year, there was a night of heavy snow. Auspicious snow indicated a good harvest, and the common people were in a joyous mood as they prayed for a good harvest in the coming year. However, to the general residents in the Ding capital, this was definitely a special year. The Shen family's second household lost a daughter, and the matriarch of the household went crazy. And the first household that had the most power and influence seemed to be in discord with the other two households. It was not as close as in the past, and there was an obvious estrangement. The Huang family that was previously engaged to Shen Qing, because of Shen Qing's matter, it was considered as a complete enmity with the Shen family. Because Shen Xian and wife were not in the Ding capital all year round, they did not vent their anger on him. As for the Wei family that was engaged to Shen Miao, Luo Shuiyan personally came forward and personally confirmed that it was just a misunderstanding. The Wei family was honest and did not make things difficult for her. In addition, Shen Xian also promised to help Wei Darren in court in the future, thus the Wei family was naturally willing to give this face. Thus to Shen Miao, this new year was rather good. Without Fu Xiu-yi, without Prince Yu, and without Ren Wanyun and Shen Qing, some things were still changing step by step. However, she was happy, but some people were not so happy. In Rongjing Tang, old Shen Furen was sitting on her seat as Shen Yuanbo crawled around beside her, but she was somewhat impatient. A look of resentment appeared on her shriveled face. Eldest Shen now do not place me in her eyes. This year there was not even a little more money in the public residence. The few chests of treasures that were previously bestowed by the palace were all locked in their own courtyard. What do they want to do? And they still do not place me in their eyes. Old Shen Furen got angry when the matter was mentioned. In the past, Shen Xian would send the things bestowed by the palace to the public residence every year. Because both husband and wife were not in the Ding capital, other than leaving some toys that Shen Miao liked, the rest of the things were useless to them. Old Shen Furen had tasted the sweetness of it, and now that there was an unforeseen event between Shen Xian and the Shen family, Shen Xian did not even send any money. In old Shen Furen's eyes, it was simply disgraceful. Old Furen must not be angry. Perhaps after these few days, when eldest master's anger has dissipated, the things will be sent over. Zhang Mama, who was at the side, comforted. One think that eldest master is dissatisfied with the treatment of fifth young lady, thus he is not willing to send the things over. How did you treat fifth girl? Old Shen Furen said angrily, for so many years, I provided for her to eat and drink and raised her up to this age. Eldest Shen is still not satisfied. I think he just doesn't want to recognize me as his mother. An ingrate who can't support his family. And that Luo Shuiyan, now even the fifth girl has become so cunning. Who knows if there's someone teaching her behind the scenes. Zhang Mama saw that old Shen Furen was angry and was silent for a moment before saying, now fifth young lady has grown up and her thoughts are heavier. However, fifth miss had grown up in front of old grandma. Fifth miss had always been obedient to old grandma's words. It could be seen that she still respected old grandma. It would be better for old Furen to summon fifth young miss in front of her one day and coax her. Both of them were young girls, so it would be easy to coax them. Fifth miss is the lifeblood of first master and first madam. If we can control fifth miss, doesn't it mean that we can control first master and his family? This Zhang Mama was also a scheming person. In fact, old Shen Furen was after all a prostitute and had endless despicable means, but when it came to being the matriarch of the household, she had the heart but not the ability. For so many years, if it was not for Zhang Mama's guidance, one did not know how big of a joke would have been. Old Shen Furen sneered, I still need to coax her. Once I see that girl, I would think of that slut. She had been dead for so many years but still occupied master's heart. Favoring their first household in everything, and now I still need to please her. I feel disgusted when I see her. Chapter 290. Zhang Mama was somewhat helpless and wanted to continue persuading but saw the maid at the door saying, Second young master, you have arrived. Shen Yuan walked in big strides. Yuaner. Seeing Shen Yuan enter, old Shen Furen's attitude eased up a lot. Shen Yuan Bo, who was on the couch, saw it and also smiled as he looked at his second older brother. Shen Yuan did not reach out to hug Shen Yuan Bo and only smiled, come over to take a look at Zumu. What is there to see about me? Old Shen Furen said angrily, but her face was filled with joy. Among these grandsons, the one she loved the most was Shen Yuan. Shen Yuan was talented and learned at such a young age and even entered an official career. Everyone praised him and gave her face. Naturally, he was the most valued by old Shen Furen. One was fortunate to obtain a bottle of snow jade ointment and specially brought it over for Zumu. Zumu must not disappoint this grandson's good intentions. Shen Yuan smiled as he handed the bottle over to old Shen Furen. Old Shen Furen was somewhat surprised and then pretended to be angry. How old am I already and still need these? Could it be that you are deliberately angering me? Even though it was so, there was an expression of fondness on her face. Old Shen Furen was after all a songstress and these rouge and cosmetics would not be broken even when she was old. Shen Yuan also knew how to cater to her liking and immediately old Shen Furen's gloomy mood was swept away. Zumu is still young and this kind of good thing is to be used on Zumu. Shen Yuan flattered without a change in expression. Both grandfather and grandson then spoke a few more words. Shen Yuan was an astute person and old Shen Furen liked him, and in addition he deliberately picked words that made old Shen Furen happy. The atmosphere in Rongjing Tang was incomparably harmonious and even Shen Yuan Bo, who was on the couch, was left out. After speaking for a while, Shen Yuan suddenly thought of something and said unintentionally, speaking of Zumu, it seems that in a few days Biao younger sister and Biao younger brother will be coming. Old Shen Furen was surprised for a moment before speaking in a cold tone, what Biao younger brother and Biao younger sister? They will leave after staying for a few days. Before old Shen Furen became a singing female, she also had a family and perhaps it was her family that sold her to a brothel. Old Shen Furen's ancestral home was Suzhou and afterwards old Shen Furen was brought to the Ding capital by General Shen to become a general's Furen, thus naturally she cut off all contact with her family. It was just that this year one did not know where that family heard about old Shen Furen's news and let their own pair of grandchildren to come to the Ding capital, saying that they were here to visit old Shen Furen, but in fact everyone knew that it was just to borrow the autumn wind. For a person like old Shen Furen who would forsake righteousness at the sight of profit, and having not met for so many years, it was naturally impossible for her to have any kinship. Now that Shen Yuan mentioned the matter, naturally she was not willing to talk more. Shen Yuan said with a smile, I have never seen this pair of Biao younger sister before, one think that their age is similar to fifth younger sister. He sighed, speaking of which, during eldest brother's return to the Ding capital, I heard that eldest Bo and eldest Shen were helping him to pick out a favored young lady. Most likely they would be worried about him. Shinchio wants to pick a wife. Old Shinfuren suddenly sat up straight. Why do I not know of this matter? Your Honor, do you know which family's young lady they are picking? This one do not know. Shin Yuan thought about it, but with eldest Bo's and eldest Shin's family background, naturally they should pick that young lady from the residence that has a high position and power. Eldest brother already has such a future, and with the support of eldest Sa's residence, it would be like adding wings to a tiger and he would be able to go up another level. The more Shin Yuan said it like that, the uglier old Shin Furen's face became. After a long while she then said sourly, that would also depend on whether the other young lady would fancy him or not. Shin Yuan pretended not to know and said unintentionally, but the most important thing is that eldest brother likes it. If eldest brother likes it, then there is no harm in not having a family background. If I were to say, perhaps our youngest Biao younger sister would be fancied by eldest brother, and at that time it would be even closer. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.